Chapter 348. Which 7th grade battle saint wouldn't stay far away from such a battle? Stop right there. The heaven and earth obsidian flame isn't something you can touch. Get lost. Bei Gongming coldly shouted at Bufang, stopping him from moving forward. You? What are you trying to do? Bei Gongming squinted his eyes. Even though he was in a sorry state, his gaze was still sharp. After all, the pressure of a 9th grade supreme being was still there. If Bufang was alone, he was just a 7th grade battle saint. In the eyes of a supreme being, he was nothing more than an ant. Thus, he wouldn't attract too much attention. The supreme being fire dragon that crawled out of the pit roared and aimed straight at Bufang. Find a place to play by yourself. Wait for my instructions, Bufang lightly said as he patted Xiao Bai's plump belly. The heaven and earth obsidian flame belonged to him, Bei Gongming. No one could take it away from him. After walking a few steps, he finally arrived in front of the giant pit of fire. In the future, no one would be able to cook such delicious roasted meat, because at this moment, Bufang didn't conceal his true energy. The aura of a 7th grade battle saint flowed around his body. Naturally, Bei Gongming could see through at a glance. As for whether or not he would attract the attention of the supreme beings when he got close to the 10,000 bestial flames, that would have to wait and see. However, just as he finished speaking, he felt his scalp go numb. Just as he got up, he fell to the ground again. This time, he couldn't even get up. He was knocked unconscious. That wasn't snatching a fortuitous encounter, but suicide. Bei Gongming felt a gust of wind blowing toward him. He widened his eyes in bewilderment as he stared at the black walk flying toward his face. Before he could finish speaking, the black walk smacked his head. This was a fortuitous encounter that belonged to him. As Bufang's cultivation level increased, Xiao Bai's battle prowess also rose to the middle stage of 9th grade. Why would a mere 7th grade battle saint like him join the fun? If I say get lost, then get lost. Don't talk so much nonsense, or else I'll kill you. Bei Gongming coldly said. Heaven and earth treasures belong to the fated. You snatch yours, I snatch mine, but you must provoke me. Duan Yun slumped to the ground in a dispirited manner. He took a bite of the barbecued meat and savored the rich fragrance of the delicious barbecued meat in the air. However, he felt a little sorrowful in his heart. His arm, which was pressing on Bufang's shoulder, actually failed to pull this 7th grade battle saint away. He was a supreme being. Although he was heavily injured, he was still a supreme being. In the end, the Azura's Gate Overlord had flung a stream of true energy at him, nearly crippling him. Don't make a fuss. Treasures of heaven and earth belong to those who are fated to get them. Naturally, I can get a try, Bufang said. Even though the Shura sect Overlord was at the peak of the supreme being level, he came from outside the southern region after all. He definitely had his own methods. He hesitated for a moment, then shouted toward Bufang's gradually disappearing figure. He felt that he had to stop Bufang. He didn't want to watch Bufang throw away his life without doing anything. Bufang waved the black turtle constellation walk. He shot a glance at the unconscious Bei Gongming and curled the corners of his mouth. Bufang was now a 7th grade battle saint. Even though Xiao Bai had already reached the peak of 9th grade, there were still ranks within the 9 grades. How could he be ignored by a trash 7th grade battle saint in the training ground? Especially, this kid's target seemed to be the heaven and earth obsidian flame floating in the sky. Previously, he still had some interest in the heaven and earth obsidian flame, but now he had no interest in it at all. Didn't he see so many supreme being experts fighting over it? With his cultivation level, he would probably be smashed to the ground by a large group of supreme beings the moment he rushed in. Roar. At this moment, Bei Gongming had long lost his heroic spirit. He was in a sorry state, and his body was covered with wounds. The bridge of his nose was slightly twisted, and a scarlet snake was trickling down from it. Xiao Bai was dumbfounded. Then, he stood still and turned around, guarding Bufang's back like a boulder. However, it was precisely because he had seen through Bufang's plan that he was confused. Black smoke curled around Bufang's right hand. A black wok gradually floated up and landed in his hand. Bufang knitted his brows. He turned around and expressionlessly looked at Bei Gongming, who was looking at him with disdain. How could he be ignored by Bei Gongming? Bufang wasn't that foolish. Bufang stopped after taking 2 steps. He widened his eyes and stared at the figure who suddenly crawled up from the ground. Of course, even if he couldn't snatch it, a mere 7th grade battle saint didn't have the qualifications to covet the heaven and earth obsidian flame. In the distance, the sound of rubble falling resounded. A figure covered in blood and in a sorry state crawled out from the rubble. Beneath the pit of fire was surging magma, and a monstrous heat gushed out from it. A piece of barbecued meat fell to the ground. Duan Yun, who had just regained his senses, felt his heart ache for a long time. Just like how Xiao Bai was suppressed by the surest sex venerable, Xiao Bai only had the combat prowess of an elementary 9th grade battle saint. Therefore, Bufang planned to let Xiao Bai distract a supreme being while he went over in a low-profile manner. There was indeed something wrong with this guy's head. Bufang nodded his head. He gripped the dragon bone kitchen knife and walked toward the pit of fire, which was spewing monstrous flames. Bei Gongming's face froze. He turned his head to look at Bufang. At the same time, Bufang also slowly turned his head, and their eyes met. Wasn't this the biggest joke in the world? Bufang glanced at Bei Gongming and curled up the corners of his mouth. He didn't pay any attention to this ragged guy and walked straight toward the pit of fire. As expected, he was an idiot who had lost his mind due to temptation. Bei Gongming was already holding back his anger. Now that he was being ignored by this brat, he was about to explode from anger. A mere 7th grade battle saint would be incinerated into ashes the moment he came into contact with the heaven and earth obsidian flames. Bufang held the pitch-black dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand. With the innate dragon might of the dragon bone kitchen knife, the spirit beasts in the surroundings were tactful and didn't come looking for trouble with Bufang. Fortunately, his cultivation level was extremely high. He managed to hang on to his last breath of true energy and didn't die under the bombardment of the true energy. Even though Xiao Bai could take a beating, Bufang couldn't guarantee that he could withstand the bombardment of so many Supreme Being experts. Along with the movement of his arm, the black wok gradually grew bigger. Soon, it became the size of a human. A 7th grade battle saint actually wanted to lay his hands on the heaven and earth obsidian flames. Occasionally, there would be some bewildered spirit beasts pouncing toward Bufang. However, they were all smashed away by Xiao Bai's fist. However, what made him feel even more incredulous was that Bufang actually walked toward the place where the group of supreme beings were fighting. When Bei Gongming saw Bufang, he was also somewhat dumbfounded. Bufang couldn't be bothered with Bei Gongming, who was knocked unconscious by his walk. His gaze shifted toward the blazing heaven and earth obsidian flames. However, his shout was quickly drowned out by the rumbling of the Supreme Being's battle. He was unable to call back Bufang's figure. This figure's aura was weak, and he was gasping for breath. However, this wasn't the main point. Swoosh! What kind of grudge did he have against Bufang? Bei Gongming let out a whimper as his whole body was sent flying away. His figure suddenly shot out and landed in the distance. The disdain on Bei Gongming's face became even more apparent. Was he hallucinating, or was there something wrong with this kid's head? At that moment, he felt as though a bottle of 5 flavors had been knocked over. A mess of flavors gushed into his mouth. He heard a crisp cracking sound and felt a sharp pain on the bridge of his nose. Swoosh! Bei Gongming lightly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot. Instantly, he appeared beside Bufang with a swoosh. With so many Supreme Beings present, if Bufang wanted to rely on Xiao Bai to snatch the 10,000 bestial flames, it was no different from a fool's dream. Heaven and earth treasures belonged to the fated. However, how could a 7th grade Supreme Being like Bufang be considered a fated one? Could he withstand the dreadful might of the heaven and earth obsidian flames? According to Bufang, if he couldn't even come into contact with it, how could he possibly obtain it? What the F***CK? He pressed down on Bufang's shoulder and wanted to pull this troublesome 7th grade battle saint to the side. Without the slightest precaution or apprehension, Bei Gongming kissed the black turtle constellation, walk face to face. Xiao Bai's chubby figure followed beside Bufang. One man and one puppet rapidly traversed through the valley, slowly moving toward the location of the fire pit. A seventh-grade battle saint came to a place where so many supreme beings were fighting. A dragon's roar resounded. Above Bufang's head, a giant head slowly drooped down. Two enormous lantern-like eyes stared at him. If he brought Xiao Bai along, he would be too obvious a target. Moreover, Xiao Bai's battle prowess wasn't any weaker than a supreme being's. It would easily attract the attention of those supreme beings who were fighting. Chapter 349. The one-legged toad was a supreme beast from the wildlands. Its strength was terrifying, and it was the overlord of the wildlands. Even the godly temple of the wildlands didn't dare to offend this one-legged toad. They had come to the 100,000 mountains to fight for the heaven and earth obsidian flames after discussing with each other. As a supreme beast, its combat prowess was naturally terrifying. Every time it croaked, the people around it would feel their hearts tremble. The enormous one-legged toad swung its arms. Every time it slapped down, the ground would shake. The serpentine sovereign swayed her serpent tail. Her serpent tail was different from the ordinary serpent people's tails in the illusory spirit swamp. Her serpent tail was green, and the scales on it were like emerald green gems. It was a dazzling sight. The serpentine sovereign had a voluptuous figure. Her waist was slender, and her speed of movement was extremely fast. Because the serpentine sovereign was too slippery, the one-legged toad found it difficult to deal with her. The irascible one-legged toad leaped high into the air and stomped down. However, it didn't manage to trample the serpentine sovereign to death. The serpentine sovereign's spiraling figure abruptly sprung forward. Her beautiful face carried a tinge of loveliness and coldness. Suddenly, her bright red lips opened, and she slowly pulled out a bone whip that had been pieced together from her throat. With her green hair fluttering in the wind, the serpentine sovereign's red lips curled up slightly. Then, she dashed forward and swung the bone whip, leaving numerous wounds on the one-legged toad's leg. The injured one-legged toad became more and more irascible. The two of them engaged in a fierce battle, causing endless booms. The warriors of the godly temple of the wildlands and the clear sky pagoda were fighting. There were supreme being warriors and 8th-grade war gods on both sides. As they exchanged blows, all kinds of true energy rippled out. They were ready to risk everything for the 10,000 bestial flames. Before seeing the 10,000 bestial flames, their goal was to prevent the Shura sect demons from obtaining it. But now that they saw the 10,000 bestial flames, the greed in their hearts couldn't be suppressed. They attacked each other for their own benefits. The Shura sect overlord, Duan Ling, had obviously anticipated this situation. He merely glanced at the group and sneered. He could feel the pure spiritual energy from the departed soul orb surging into his body, instantly transforming into the Shura true energy in his body. This true chi made him feel that his cultivation was constantly getting stronger. The villa master of the White Cloud Villa, Wu Mu, could clearly feel the increasing pressure. This pressure caused his complexion to become increasingly unsightly. The cloud rising sword spun in his hand. Every thrust of his sword was accompanied by a loud clamor. Thousands of sword intents swept down from the heavens like a long river. Boom! 2 different sword wills collided in the air. Wu Mu's sword will was pure and majestic, while Duan Ling's sword energy was bloody and terrifying. As they collided, Wu Mu's sword intent was pushed back bit by bit. Moreover, as time passed, the speed at which he was forced to retreat became faster and faster. This was because Duan Ling's sword was getting stronger and stronger. Duan Ling cultivated the Shura sect sword will, a sword will that was cultivated from mountains of corpses and seas of blood. In the past, the Shura sect stirred up a bloodbath in the southern region because Duan Ling cultivated the Shura sect sword will. At that time, Duan Ling was invincible and suppressed the entire southern region. He was the nightmare of all the southern region's forces. Later on, the Celestial Arcanum sect and the other major sect joined forces to suppress and disperse the Shura sect. Now, the Shura sect was making a comeback. This time, Duan Ling's Shura sect sword was even stronger. His cultivation was also getting stronger. He even wanted to borrow the heaven and earth obsidian flames to break through the shackles of the Supreme Being realm and step into the 10th grade Supreme Being realm. Shura, sect demon, don't even think about getting the 10,000 bestial flames. Wu Mu roared with blood dripping from his mouth. Then, thousands of sword intents converged and transformed into a giant sword. This sword light seemed as though it was going to tear through the heavens. Duan Ling's gaze became serious. This Wu Mu was actually burning his blood essence and becoming more and more courageous. Bu Fong held the black turtle constellation wok in his right hand and the dragon bone kitchen knife in his left. He raised his head and looked at the supreme fire dragon, whose body seemed to be burning with flames. This was a supreme beast. A terrifying pressure was faintly discernible on the body of the fire dragon. Bu Fong could sense how terrifying this fire dragon was. Roar! The fire dragon roared, and the magma within the fire pit seemed to erupt. Waves of heat rolled over and blew at Bu Fong's hair. The velvet rope tied around Bu Fong's hair was snapped, and his hair fluttered in the wind. Bu Fong furrowed his brows and poured his true energy into the black turtle constellation wok. The pitch-black turtle constellation wok suddenly expanded in size. Moreover, the pitch-black body of the wok shone with a golden luster. The patterns on its surface seemed to have come to life and were incomparably mysterious. The fire dragon opened its mouth, which was filled with ferocious fangs, and let out a roar. Then it fiercely bit down on Bu Fong. It wanted to swallow the ant in front of it in one bite. Bu Fong raised his palm, and the enormous black turtle constellation wok suddenly floated up. Then Bu Fong gently exhaled and slapped the black turtle constellation wok with his palm. A dull thud resounded. The enormous and resplendent black turtle constellation wok was slapped by Bu Fong and was sent flying toward the fire dragon. The fire dragon opened its mouth and actually spat out a flaming dragon's breath. The temperature of that dragon's breath was extremely scorching, and it hit the black turtle constellation wok. Boom! Boom! A streak of purple light flashed past. Xiao Bai's figure suddenly burst out from afar. His eyes turned purple as he stomped his feet on the ground. He raised his chubby head, and his whole body was like a cannonball that shot up into the sky. With a swoosh, he appeared in front of the black turtle constellation wok. He raised his fist and smashed it on the black turtle constellation wok. With a buzzing sound, the black turtle constellation wok, which was blocked by the dragon's breath, suddenly rolled forward and ruthlessly hit the head of the fire dragon. The black turtle constellation wok was originally heavy and incomparably sturdy. With such a smash, the supreme fire dragon was a little dumbfounded. The enormous fire dragon staggered a few steps backward and instantly fell into the boiling lava with a plop. Xiao Bai was sucked into the black turtle constellation wok, his purple eyes shining. With a stomp of his leg, Xiao Bai's figure spun 360 degrees in the air, turning into a nimble fatty and landing hard on the ground. After that attack, the black turtle constellation wok once again became black and swarthy. It returned to Bu Fong's hand and was caught by Bu Fong with one hand. With a light bang, the black turtle constellation wok directly turned into green smoke and dissipated. Swoosh! Within the lava, the roaring figure of the fire dragon darted out. A pair of fleshy wings flapped, rolling up thousands of fire waves. The dragon's eyes surged with murderous intent as it stared at Bu Fong. Xiao Bai stomped his leg again. The ground cracked under the stomp. His whole body was like a cannonball as he shot out and punched the mouth of the fire dragon, attracting its attention. The two of them were locked in a fierce battle. Bu Fong looked at the fire dragon and Xiao Bai, who had started to fight. He turned his head, and his gaze fell on the golden flame that was quietly burning in the air. Above the flame was a grayish-white bead. Countless spirit essences and remnant souls were circulating in the white bead. Bu Fong tiptoed, his figure swaying as he floated in the air. After breaking through to 7th grade battle saint, he could temporarily hover in the air, which was somewhat convenient. Otherwise, Bufang would have to worry about how to approach the 10,000 bestial flames. Although this was his first time hovering in the air, and although it was crooked and ugly, at least he safely arrived in front of the 10,000 bestial flames. The temperature around the 10,000 bestial flames was terrifying. As soon as Bufang approached, he felt as if his whole body was burning. The scorching temperature made him frown involuntarily. As a heaven and earth obsidian flame, the 10,000 bestial flames naturally had its extraordinary features. From time to time, the sparks around the raging flames would transform into ferocious-looking spirit beasts that pounced on Bufang. They were like ferocious tigers, lions, lone wolves, and savage dragons. There were all kinds of them, and their savage energy was extremely terrifying. System: how do I collect the 10,000 bestial flames? As Bufang got closer to the heaven and earth obsidian flames, his whole body was drenched in sweat. As his hair fluttered in the wind, some strands of his hair stuck to his face and body. As for how to collect the 10,000 bestial flames, Bufang naturally had no idea, so he asked the system. The 10,000 bestial flames is a heaven and earth obsidian flame, a treasure of heaven and earth formed by the accumulation of the spirit energy of heaven and earth. The system does not provide services for the heaven and earth obsidian flame, but it can provide the host with a method to collect the heaven and earth obsidian flame. The system's solemn and earnest voice rang out. Bufang was dumbfounded. Then, a hazy voice resounded in his mind. The voice was faintly discernible and distant. This was the method the system transmitted to Bufang to collect the heaven and earth obsidian flame. In the distance, the Shura sect overlord, Duan Ling, was suppressing Wu Mu. All of a sudden, he sensed something. He turned his head and saw a tiny figure hovering beside the heaven and earth obsidian flame. Since when did someone get so close to the heaven and earth obsidian flame? Duan Ling was startled. He carefully sensed the figure and discovered that the cultivation level of the figure was merely that of a 7th grade battle saint. So it's just a small fry that overestimates himself. The heaven and earth obsidian flame is so violent. How would anyone below the level of a supreme being dare to covet it? Just wait to be burned to ashes. Duan Ling laughed disdainfully in his heart. He no longer paid attention to the figure because he knew that once that person greedily tried to collect the heaven and earth obsidian flame, he would be mercilessly burned to death. Not only Duan Ling, but the others also witnessed this scene. Many people were secretly sneering at Bufang for overestimating himself. However, of course, there were exceptions. The supreme being of the clear sky pagoda, Yi Yunxing, widened his eyes. The fat on his face trembled as he stared at the figure hovering beside the 10,000 bestial flames. Isn't this Ownerbu? Yi Ziling's face was also filled with a strange expression. Her cherry lips were agape in shock. It really was Ownerbu. Shouldn't this guy be running a small shop in the Imperial City? Why would he come to the 100,000 mountains, sneak into a crowd of supreme beings, and appear beside the 10,000 bestial flames? More importantly, was the 10,000 bestial flames something he could touch? Wouldn't Ownerbu be burned to death by the 10,000 bestial flames? Probably. Yi Ziling thought to herself hesitantly. At this moment, Bufang didn't care about what the others thought. He slowly opened his eyes. The 10,000 bestial flames, which were glaring and scorching hot, gradually became gentle in his eyes. Chapter 350. The system's voice resounded in Bufang's mind, reverberating in the distance. He discovered that true energy was rapidly flowing out of his energy center and coursing through his body. His arms were instantly covered by true energy, as though the veins in his arms were opened up by the true energy. Bufang knew that this was the cultivation method the system taught him to subdue the heaven and earth obsidian flames. After all, The heaven and earth obsidian flames were heavenly treasures formed by the accumulation of heaven and earth spirit energy. Without some tricks, how could one subdue them? However, after studying the method provided by the system, he opened his eyes and looked at the 10,000 bestial flames with a gentler gaze. It was especially amiable. If someone saw Bu Fang's gaze at this moment, they would definitely think that he was an idiot. However, only Bu Fang himself knew that he wasn't an idiot. The method provided by the system was simply tailor-made for him. The way to subdue the 10,000 bestial flames is to eat it. Eat it. This bizarre method was the reason why Bu Fang was dumbfounded. However, after the initial shock, Bu Fang finally understood. This was also why he looked at the 10,000 bestial flames with such a gentle gaze. The method provided by the system was indeed the most suitable for Bu Fang. As Bu Fang looked at the 10,000 bestial flames, his pupils slightly dilated and a hint of excitement appeared in his eyes. He wondered how the 10,000 bestial flames would taste. This was just a ball of fire, so the taste shouldn't be that great. The texture should be even worse. This was the first time he had eaten fire in his life, so he was a little nervous. Bu Fang squinted his eyes and pondered. While he squinted his eyes and pondered, the true energy in his body had completely covered his entire body according to the method provided by the system. Bu Fang's skin seemed to turn red. He slightly opened his mouth and exhaled a breath of hot air. Bu Fang looked at the 10,000 bestial flames with a burning gaze. A loud clanging sound echoed. The blood-colored Shurasect sword will directly crushed the white cloud Villain Master's sword will. Wu Mu was sent flying, and blood dripped from the corners of his mouth. The battle between the two had already shaved the surrounding trees into pieces. The sharp sword Qi was practically unstoppable. Every time it struck down, it would leave a hole in the ground. The battle between the Grand Elder and the Azura's Gate High Priest had reached its climax. In fact, the battle between the two formation sovereigns was even more exciting. Although it didn't seem obvious on the surface, the risks involved in their battle wasn't something that either of them dared to bear. If they were careless and revealed an opening, the other party would take advantage of that opening and increase the damage. At that time, the formation would be broken and the people would die. Therefore, the battle between formation supreme beings was much more dangerous than the battle between ordinary supreme beings. The High Priestess was wearing a doo-doo, and her voluptuous figure was on full display. Her exquisite face, which was hidden under the mask, was filled with a grave expression. She crossed her fair legs, and blood-red jade talismans floated around her body, forming a mysterious formation. On the other hand, the Tianji sect's Supreme Elder seemed to be much more relaxed. After all, he had been studying arrays for so many years, and his understanding of arrays was much deeper than the High Priest's. It was a piece of cake for him to deal with. Duan Yun, who was watching from afar, was already in a daze. His eyes were wide open as he sucked on the roasted meat from the wooden branch. His gray hair fluttered in the violent waves of energy. This kid actually managed to get there, so close to the heaven and earth obsidian flames. Why isn't he burned to death? Duan Yun was truly in disbelief. Perhaps Bu Fang had always been a little unfathomable to him. Whether it was his mysterious culinary skills or the fact that he was only a 7th grade supreme being, he was able to use a black walk to knock him down. All of these baffled him. He had always suspected that Bu Fang was someone from outside the southern region. After all, the Hidden Dragon continent was so vast that it was normal for 1 or 2 extraordinary people to appear. Suddenly, Duan Yun became excited. What if this kid really managed to snatch the 10,000 bestial flames? That would be fun. A bunch of supreme beings were fighting over the heaven and earth obsidian flames, but in the end, it was snatched away by an ant-like 7th grade battle saint. Just the thought of it was exhilarating. Yi Xiling, Yi Yunqing, and the others, who were acquainted with Bu Fang, found it increasingly inconceivable. They would never have imagined that Bu Fang would appear here. Duan Ling felt that his cultivation was getting stronger and stronger. The spirit energy that shot down from the sky seemed to have materialized into a beam of light. His body hungrily absorbed the the spirit energy. He felt as if the shackles on his body were continuously being broken. He felt as if he was about to step into a whole new realm, the 10th grade divine echelon. The Shurasek came from outside the southern region. He clearly knew how powerful the 10th grade divine echelon, which was above the 9th grade supreme being, was. Below the divine echelon, even the 9th grade supreme being, were all mortals. Their bodies were all shackles that bound them. In front of the divine echelon, even a supreme being was just an ant. Gripping the Shurasek sword, the sword energy that gushed out his arm became increasingly powerful. With a slash, the majestic true energy seemed to be able to traverse the vast sky. With a single slash, Wu Mu was sent flying, spitting out blood. Wu Mu was also a swordsman who had comprehended the sword will. However, in front of Duan Ling's ever-increasing strength, he became extremely weak. Ha ha ha! Break for me! My Shura sect will eventually rise again. I, Duan Ling, will eventually return to glory. Duan Ling laughed excitedly. His laughter was filled with a domineering aura that reverberated in the surroundings. On the ground, bathed Gongming, who had been knocked out by Bu Fong with a black turtle constellation walk, finally sat up, swaying. He felt as if his head was about to be torn apart. His crooked nose bridge hurt him to the bone. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Who did he offend? Bei Gongming felt as if his face was no longer his own. He had failed miserably at such an easy task. As he thought about it, his hatred for Bu Fong, who was the instigator of all this, intensified. Bei Gongming's mind flickered, and he began to search for Bu Fong. His gaze shifted and locked onto the figure in the distance. It would have been fine if he didn't look at it, but the moment he did, he was so scared that his heart almost jumped out of his chest. Is that kid crazy? In his eyes, that ant-like 7th grade battle saint was actually reaching out to grab the heaven and earth obsidian flames. Even a supreme being expert wouldn't dare to have such intimate contact with the heaven and earth obsidian flames. Bu Fong felt his body heating up, and he couldn't help but furrow his brows. He reached out his hand, revealing his fair and clean fingers. Buzz, as if sensing Bu Fong's approach, the 10,000 bestial flames suddenly trembled and an invisible wave spread out. The wave seemed to be warning Bu Fong to stay away. Bu Fong couldn't even care less about a person's emotions, let alone a ball of flames. In his eyes, the 10,000 bestial flames seemed to have transformed into a steaming hot oyster pancake, filled with an alluring fragrance. Bu Fong licked his lips, and his palm finally neared the 10,000 bestial flames. A peculiar suction force erupted from his palm, and Bu Fong's brows twitched. Boom! Whitey fiercely stomped on the ground, and its entire body shot up. It actually floated to Bu Fong's side. In his eyes, a purple glow shone brightly, and his will to fight intensified. As Bu Fong grabbed the heaven and earth obsidian flames, he could only feel one thing. It was scorching hot, extremely scorching hot. This ball of flames was really scalding. The true energy within Bu Fong's body was constantly flowing, and the mysterious route allowed Bu Fong to hold onto the heaven and earth obsidian flames, making it difficult for the opponent to break free. Fortunately, the 10,000 bestial flames had just taken shape, and its power wasn't that strong. Therefore, Bu Fong could still control it. If its power was a little stronger, Bu Fong might really be burned to ashes. This was what Bu Fong, who was currently absorbing the 10,000 bestial flames, truly felt. What is this? Bu Fong exhaled lightly, and the breath he exhaled was scalding hot, as if it was about to boil. However, Bu Fong was very calm. He saw a grayish-white bead hovering above the 10,000 bestial flames. Surging spirit energy and monstrous wails were constantly gushing out from the bead. Reaching out a hand, Bu Fong grabbed the scalding bead and directly pulled it down from above the flames. It seems a little familiar. Bu Fong squinted his eyes. He felt that this bead was somewhat similar to the Soul Congregation array he had obtained previously. However, Bu Fong had always scoffed at this kind of thing. After all, it couldn't be eaten. Xiao Bai, open your stomach, Bu Fong calmly said to Xiao Bai, who was hovering in the air beside him. Xiao Bai was filled with ferocity as he prepared to slaughter the fire dragon below. When he suddenly heard Bu Fong's order, the purple glow in his mechanical eyes flickered. Following Bu Fong's order, Xiao Bai's stomach opened up, and a pitch-black hole emerged. Looking at the gloomy and pitch-black hole, Bu Fong tossed the grayish-white bead in his hand, then directly threw it into Xiao Bai's stomach. Duan Ling, who was hovering in the air and bathing in the torrential spirit energy, had a look of enjoyment on his face. He felt as if his entire being was ascending. The pure spirit energy was refined from the boundless spirit energy, and his body could naturally absorb it. When he absorbed all the spirit energy in the departed soul orb, he would be able to break the shackles of the Supreme Being realm and step into the 10th grade. When that time came, he would be able to rule the world. He would have the capital to lead the surest sect to rise again, and once again slaughter his way back to the continent. He was intoxicated by the feeling of his true energy skyrocketing, and he was addicted to the pleasure of increasing his strength. However, this pleasurable feeling didn't last for long. All of a sudden, it stopped abruptly. The light beam of spirit energy, descending from the sky, gradually dried up and then disappeared. Duan Ling opened his eyes abruptly, and his mind trembled violently. What happened? Why did the spirit energy descending from the departed soul orb disappear? Who touched my departed soul orb? Who was the one who ruined my chance? His heart was burning with anger. He turned his head to look in the direction of the 10,000 bestial flames, and what he saw made his lungs explode. Chapter 351. It would never have guessed that someone was planning to eat it. You're insane. You even want to eat the heaven and earth obsidian flames. Are you still human? The 10,000 bestial flames initially struggled for a while, but in the end, it was as if it had nothing left to live for and was too lazy to even struggle. The sound of metal colliding suddenly burst forth from Xiao Bai's back. Then, a pair of wide metal wings appeared abruptly, emanating a chilling metallic glow. The fire dragon in the pit of fire roared, its dragon breath shooting in all directions. With a flap of its wings, it soared into the sky, aiming directly at Bu Fong. What grudge did you have against me? Why did you do this to me? Bu Fong smacked his lips, feeling a strange sensation. Not only did the 7th grade battle saint approach the 10,000 bestial flames easily, he even grabbed it with his bare hands. This was a freaking heaven and earth obsidian flame formed by the condensation of the spirit energy of heaven and earth. Did he finish it just like that? The 5 supreme beings approached with a thunderous roar. The void seemed to tremble, and a terrifying, murderous aura blotted out the sky. Bu Fong seemed to have tasted something different. His eyebrows twitched, and he tore it bit by bit. Just like that, the entire ball of pulsating 10,000 bestial flames was completely devoured by him. Yi Ziling's exquisite face became increasingly strange. She stared at Owner Bu's actions, her large eyes blinking incessantly. Duan Ling was so angry that his hair stood on end. The blood-red sword intent wreaked havoc around his body, completely out of control. The departed soul orb was destroyed, the heaven and earth obsidian flame was stolen, and everything the Shura sect had done was for naught. Just as Bu Fong was feeling like he was on fire and suffering, the solemn voice of the system rang out. This heaven and earth obsidian flame seemed to have sensed danger. It was constantly pulsating, trying to break free from Bu Fong's restraints. It was a ball of fire, not an oyster pancake. Even a supreme being wouldn't dare to touch it. How could a mere 7th grade battle saint be so daring? The flame was golden in color, extremely dazzling. It was as beautiful as a flower that had been watered with gold. However, Bu Fong was very calm. The supreme pressure had no effect on him at all. He raised his head to take a look. Finally, the formation was completed. He heaved a sigh of relief. It stood in front of Bu Fong and faced the 5 supreme martial artists who were rushing over. This burp was accompanied by a small golden flame that scuttled out of his mouth. The Tianji sect Supreme Elder was smiling as he stroked his white beard. His eyes carried a trace of strange light as he looked at Bufang, seemingly deep in thought. The audience was silent. At this moment, everyone stopped fighting. Everyone's gaze fell on Bufang. Xiaobai's drunken body finally stopped moving. His eyes, which alternated between red and purple, finally turned gray, the same gray as the departed soul orb. This scene almost made Duan Ling's lungs explode. He was too angry. He felt that his dignity was being trampled on, and he felt that his face was being slapped. This guy wants to run away. As the ball of fire entered his stomach, Bufang's face was flushed red. He couldn't help burping. Xiao Bai, you can fly? Bufang asked in surprise. A ball of fire suddenly surged and shuttled back and forth in his mouth. Finally, it was rolled up by his tongue and swallowed with a gulp. Bufang's heart suddenly tightened. Could it be that Xiao Bai ate something bad? The orb he tossed out earlier, was that poisonous? Originally, everything was going according to his plan. He also felt the pleasure brought by the continuous improvement of his cultivation level. He opened his mouth, bit down, and tore it apart. Those who spoil my plans must be killed. This guy, he deserved to die. Duan Ling, the Shura sect overlord, was furious. Killing intent boiled in his eyes. Sword energy roared and danced around his body. The murderous intent in his heart was so thick that it almost burst him. Bufang's eyes widened. He felt white specks of light appear above his head. Those specks of light constantly converged and formed a transportation array that Bufang was very familiar with. Bufang tossed the grayish-white orb into Xiao Bai's stomach. He didn't pay any more attention to it. His mind was completely focused on the 10,000 bestial flames. Under everyone's incredulous gazes, he tore off another ball of fire. With a roll of his tongue, the mysterious flame entered his stomach. Why did you have to toss the departed soul orb to the puppet as if it was a piece of trash? With his energy center as the center, the true energy within his body spread to his limbs and bones. An irrepressible burning sensation enveloped his entire body. Looking at the 10,000 bestial flames, Bufang felt his mouth go dry. He couldn't help but stick out his tongue and lick his lips. Buzz, not to mention a 7th grade battle saint. Even an 8th grade war god would be frightened to the point that his legs would turn to jelly under the pressure of so many supreme beings. He was so angry that he couldn't even control his sore intent. His gray eyes flickered. The texture wasn't good. It was boiling hot, and the smell wasn't very strong. There was a faint, burnt smell of barbecued meat. Buzz, it allowed his cultivation to break through the shackles and break free from the shackles of the Supreme Being realm. As soon as he finished speaking, he planned to attack Bufang. However, the Supreme Elder's transportation array moved and enveloped him. Wumu also soared into the sky. White sword energy crisscrossed. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flickered continuously. Red and purple light whistled and intertwined with each other. A gust of wind howled and transformed into a tornado. It enveloped Bufang's body and tried to teleport him away. The Supreme Beings were enraged. 5 Supreme Beings attacked Bufang at the same time. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Xiao Bai floated in the air, his body emitting waves of strange energy. His chubby body swayed randomly in the air as if he was drunk. The departed soul orb quietly floated above the 10,000 bestial flames. This was Duan Ling's plan. Only after being roasted by the heaven and earth obsidian flames could the tens of thousands of spiritual essences and remnant souls in the departed soul orb be converted into surging spirit energy to nourish his body. Wu Mu also propped himself up with his sword and let out a long howl. I can't defeat you, but I'm delighted to see that you can obtain the 10,000 bestial flames. In the end, all of his hard work and painstaking efforts were thrown away like garbage, and he was even eaten by a puppet. Whoosh. He had planned this for a long time. He didn't hesitate to start a war in the Light Wind Empire and collected countless spiritual essences and departed souls just to achieve a breakthrough. All the true energy converged on Bu Feng's face. At this moment, Bu Feng's face was covered with dense true energy patterns. His eyes were fixed on the dazzling, pulsating 10,000 bestial flames. That was the departed soul orb. The semi-divine artifact departed soul orb. What happened just now? Was that person eating fire? Fire. Could it really be eaten? The Shura sect high priestess' fine black hair fluttered in the wind. Her eyes, which were hidden under the mask, were filled with rage. Her chest, which was hidden under the doo-doo, was heaving up and down. This fire is poisonous. Bu Feng thought to himself. Bu Feng's brows twitched. He was a little nervous. 5 supreme being existences. This lineup was a little scary. The magic array above Bu Feng's head became more and more obvious. The supreme being experts in the distance also came to their senses. Owner Bu isn't planning to eat fire, is he? The one-legged toad made a croaking sound. It stomped its sole leg and soared into the sky. Then it stomped down on Bu Feng's position. The Shura sect's sword flashed across the sky. Sword energy wreaked havoc. Duan Ling's gaze locked onto Bu Feng, and he pointed his sword at him. What the hell is that puppet? Why is it eating my opportunity? The departed soul orb was eaten by the puppet, and the 10,000 bestial flames was eaten by an ant. The heaven and earth obsidian flames, which was the embodiment of the spirit energy of heaven and earth, was eaten up just like that. The more the crowd watched, the stranger they became. Their expressions became more and more interesting. The way Bu Feng stretched his face toward the 10,000 bestial flames was simply stimulating their hearts. At this moment, all the Supreme Being experts had their eyes on Bu Feng. After eating the 10,000 bestial flames, the only thing Bu Feng felt was heat. His entire body was burning hot, so hot that his eyes turned red. More importantly, it wasn't burned to ashes. Of course, since the departed soul orb was eaten by the puppet, the light beam of spirit energy no longer shot out. This prevented him from continuing his breakthrough. This made him even more furious. Their faces were filled with puzzlement. They couldn't understand Bu Feng's actions. He cupped the ball of golden flames and slowly lifted it up. His mouth moved closer to it. Bu Feng furrowed his brows as he felt the 10,000 bestial flames travel down his throat and into his stomach. When the Supreme Elder saw Duan Ling's seething gaze, he felt a burst of joy in his heart. He couldn't help but throw his head back and laugh heartily. His goal was to stop Duan Ling from obtaining the 10,000 bestial flames. This inning couldn't be any better. The fats on Yi Yunqing's body were jiggling. Everyone looked at Bu Feng as if they were looking at a monster. But soon, they came back to their senses. Their expressions became more and more interesting. The eyes of the 2 supreme beings from the godly temple of the wildlands turned bloodshot. Their bodies trembled as they roared and charged toward Bu Feng. Could it be that the 10,000 bestial flames was fake? The pulsating 10,000 bestial flames also stopped moving at this moment. Duan Ling was originally filled with anger. When he saw this scene, his mouth twitched and his eyes were filled with disbelief. However, when the light beam of spirit energy that descended from the sky dried up and disappeared, Duan Ling's heart thumped. He had a bad feeling about this. Naturally, they could sense the energy of the teleportation array. Congratulations to the host for collecting the 10,000 bestial flames tinder and completing the abrupt mission. Now issuing the abrupt mission reward. Prepare to teleport back. Bu Feng's eyes widened and he hurriedly covered them. You didn't eat the flames, you ate the heartbeat. They wanted to protect Bu Feng. The Serpentine Sovereign's beautiful face was incomparably cold. She swayed her green serpent tail and dashed toward Bu Feng. Thus, he turned his head and saw a skinny figure easily plucking the departed soul orb from the top of the 10,000 bestial flames. Damn it, they were fighting for the heaven and earth obsidian flames. Now that the thing they were fighting for had been eaten by someone else, what was the point of fighting for it? In this world, there is actually such an eccentric fire eater? Bei Gongming was dumbfounded. His heart was filled with astonishment. Under the gazes of the crowd, Bufong's face finally came into contact with the 10,000 bestial flames. He exhaled a mouthful of scorching hot air that was on the verge of boiling. His eyes were blazing. Beside Bufong, Xiao Bai's figure floated up. Chapter 352. Trying to run away after acting tough? Did he really think all the supreme beings here were pushovers? He wanted to forcefully break the supreme being's shackles and ascend to the 10th grade divine realm. The supreme elder clutched his chest, gasping for air. His gray eyes flashed, cold and merciless. Xiao Bai flapped his wings and appeared under the toad's leg. Bufong was shocked. This damn toad was so vicious. Bang! Bang! Moreover, they were very interested in how Bufong could swallow the 10,000 bestial flames. Because the 10th grade divine realm required one to break the shackles of heaven and earth. It was to fight against heaven and earth. This giant toad wanted to flatten Bufong with one leg. The wind swept, and Bufong's vision was finally blurred. After spreading his wings, Xiao Bai seemed to be more energetic. White E's fist smashed into the fire dragon's head, and it actually broke open the other party's head. Although Xiao Bai's fighting capacity was not bad, he could barely fight against the supreme being. This lunatic, how could it be that easy to break through to the 10th grade divine realm? He's seeking his own death. Duan Ling was constantly gathering true energy, trying to break the shackles. These were the supreme being's shackles. Although they were gone, they still imperceptibly bound Duan Ling. In the end, he couldn't break free and step into the 10th grade. The supreme elder's face turned ashen. He staggered several steps in the air, clutching his chest as his breathing heaved. Xiao Bai's hands wrapped around the toad's leg. The giant one-legged toad felt a tremendous force coming from its leg. How could such a being appear in the training ground? What the F***CK are we going to train for? He couldn't wait any longer. He began to forcefully break through the realm. He had a feeling that Xiao Bai's transformation was related to the departed soul orb he had just given to Xiao Bai to eat. It seemed like he had eaten something bad. The ground was smashed. Broken rocks flew everywhere, but Xiao Bai's figure was nowhere to be seen. He let out a long howl that carried a hint of pain and struggle. They all stared at Bufong, their eyes filled with greed and excitement. Many people around sucked in a breath of cold air. Then a gigantic toad leg that blotted out the sun descended from the sky. After all, he hasn't broken through the shackles of the supreme being realm and can only be considered half a step into the divine realm. It's a pity that the little guy is being targeted. I hope he can escape from the demon's pursuit and survive. After all, he has devoured the 10,000 bestial flames and has a bright future ahead of him. Was this the higher realm above the supremacy stage? With a loud explosion, the chain on Duan Ling's arm shattered in half. He was holding a cold chain in his hand. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face was deathly pale. However, Duan Ling's opportunity had been interrupted by Bufong. He still had to force his way through. Once he failed, he would be reduced to ashes. What the hell? Was this really a trial ground? There was actually someone who wanted to force his way through. He wanted to break through the shackles of the Supreme Being realm and ascend to the 10th grade divine realm. The flying knife that was smashed away wobbled as it flew back to Xiao Bai's pair of wings. It became energetic again and dashed forward. He raised his fist, his gray eyes flickering as he punched down. The one-legged toad was enraged. It opened its mouth, and a monstrous wave came crashing down. A blood-red sword streaked across the sky, slashing toward Bufong as if it was going to slash through everything. Xiao Bai's machete was smashed into pieces by the Shura's sword, turning into thousands of flying knives that scattered in all directions. However, the axe was only halfway through its flight when it was smashed away by several flying knives that soared into the sky, causing it to deviate from its course. A round mechanical puppet with a pair of metal wings on its back flapped its wings. Xiao Bai streaked across the sky and stood in front of the fire dragon. If all the spirit energy in the departed soul orb had been absorbed by Duan Ling, The Supreme Elder wouldn't have dared to make such a claim. As long as he could capture this ant, he might have a chance to obtain the 10,000 bestial flames. The fire dragon, which had just risen up, was smashed back into the magma by Xiao Bai's punch. He actually pulled on the chain and dashed toward Bufang. Bufang's face was burning, and his ears were flushed. However, his eyes were filled with astonishment. He looked at Xiao Bai, who had spread his wings, and he was a little dumbfounded. Xiao Bai had grown wings? Was he going to turn into the flying Xiao Bai? A giant axe appeared in his hands. This was the semi-divine weapon of the godly temple of the wildlands, the profound heavy axe. It weighed more than 1,000 pounds, and it was indestructible. Its power was extremely formidable. Whitey abruptly slammed its fists together, emitting a clanging sound. The metal wings on its back flapped and spread out ferociously. The range of the wings suddenly expanded, turning into a dense cluster of flying daggers that connected with each other. He knew that the teleportation had begun, and he was about to leave. Holding the Shura Sect sword, Duanling raised his head and narrowed his eyes. Yi Yanqing trembled as he stroked his beard. Yi Xiling didn't understand what this meant, but as a supreme being, how could he not understand? Boom! The gale under the teleportation formation grew more and more violent. Bufang had already begun to feel a suction force, and the scene in front of him was about to become blurry. Bufang's vision was constantly obscured by the gale, and the images he could see became less and less. Xiao Bai's gray eyes flickered, and the wings on his back spread out once again. Numerous flying knives swept up, turning into a giant machete that collided with the Shura Sect sword. The muscles on his face twitched, and there was a raging fire burning in his heart. Damn it! How dare you ruin my plans? Kill! The gale howled, constantly spreading around Bufang's body, and his hair fluttered in the wind. Xiao Bai is indeed powerful. Crazy clothes stripping demon, skin this one-legged toad. Trying to teleport away? Dream on. Above the vault of heaven, there was a roar. Escape. Even if you run to the ends of the earth, I, Shura Duanling, will tear you into 1,000 pieces. You stole my opportunity and forced me to break through. This enmity will not end until one of us is dead. The two supreme beings from the godly temple of the wildlands also activated their true energy, blasting out waves of true energy. They looked incredulously at Duanling, who was standing proudly in the void, with wisps of black energy surging around him. He couldn't let Bufang escape so easily. Therefore, he had to destroy the teleportation array above Bufang's head. The attacks from both sides collided in the void, producing a constant roar. Flying knives were constantly knocked away, but the combined attack of the 5 supreme beings was constantly being weakened. In the vault of heaven, a frog croaked. The teleportation formation that had been trapping the Shura Sect Overlord Duanling was directly shattered. A terrifying pressure of heaven and earth came crashing down. Boom! The last thing Huang Xiaolong saw was the Azura's Gate, Sovereign's murderous gaze. Duanling, who had been bound by the chains, roared. His hair stood on end, and his eyes were bloodshot. Swoosh! Swoosh! The flying knives converged on Xiao Bai's back, forming a pair of wings. The combined attack of the 5 supreme beings was unexpectedly broken by Xiao Bai. The Grand Elder heaved a sigh of relief, his face a mixture of joy and worry. With a wave of his fists, the wings on Xiao Bai's back soared up into the sky. Flying knives whistled through the air, colliding with the attacks of the 5 supreme beings. The axe spun rapidly in the void, making a swooshing sound as it smashed toward Bufang. Within his body, the surging true energy was attacking the shackles in his body, and terrifying fluctuations lingered. The warrior from the godly temple of the wildlands was enraged. He let out a long roar, and the muscles on his body glowed. With a twist of his arm, the flying knife flew back to his hand. His gray eyes turned and locked on the godly temple's supreme being warrior. Roar! The 5 supreme beings in the distance dashed toward him. Their auras were extremely terrifying. Duanling's face was filled with ruthlessness. He pulled up the ice-cold chain and slowly tied it around his left arm. After binding it, the chain gradually became transparent and disappeared. A surging sword intent descended from the sky. With a croak, he felt himself being thrown away. Duan Ling's body emitted a boundless pressure. Everyone was dumbfounded because they discovered that there was actually a rustling, ice-cold shackle that appeared on Duan Ling's body. The shackle wrapped around his left arm as if it was connected to the heavens, bringing with it an unparalleled majesty and pressure. The warrior from the godly temple of the wildlands had a muscular body. He stared at the magic array above Bu Fong's head and sneered. True energy filled the air. Then, with a sudden burst of strength, the Supreme Being expert tossed out his axe. Bai Gongming, who was below, was so frightened that he fell on his butt. 5 terrifying attacks were directed at Xiao Bai. Blood splattered everywhere. The lava-like blood spurted out of the fire dragon's body with a sizzling sound. From within the pit of fire, a sonorous dragon roar resounded. A scorching dragon's breath gushed out and headed toward Xiao Bai. This was the might of heaven and earth. Bu Fong narrowed his eyes as he looked at this scene. The ice-cold chains that contained a frightening pressure caused him to feel a little frightened. All of a sudden, his eyes focused. He had to stop this crazy Shura sect overlord. However, at this moment, Xiao Bai seemed to have taken some kind of medicine. He suddenly became so ferocious. He was even more ferocious than a supreme being. Rumble. The 10,000 bestial flames was eaten by this puny ant. However, how could this 7th-grade battle saint refine the heaven and earth obsidian flames in such a short period of time? Perhaps the heaven and earth obsidian flames were still inside this ant's body. Wu Mu spat out another mouthful of blood. The scarlet blood stained the front of his shirt. From their point of view, even though this ant's cultivation level wasn't high, he was full of secrets. These secrets, they were very curious. Xiao Bai's gray eyes were incomparably cold. The pair of steel wings on his back stretched across the vast sky, emitting a terrifying metallic luster. Xiao Bai possessed boundless strength. His body seemed so tiny in front of the one-legged toad. However, he was still able to lift this gigantic supreme being beast and send it flying. He stretched out his hands. Instantly, numerous cracks appeared on his hands. Steel chains shot out from within and hooked onto the leg of the one-legged toad. After the one-legged toad was flung away, the remaining 3 supreme beings rushed over. Yi Xilin's eyes lit up. She was so excited that she was about to jump for joy. The Serpentine Sovereign had a slender waist. She opened her beautiful red lips and spat out a sharp longsword. As the sword gleamed, cold light shone in all directions. The sword slashed at Xiao Bai's body. Xiao Bai was sent flying and crashed heavily into the ground. With a swoosh, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. With a dragon's roar, the fire dragon flapped its wings in the fire pit. It opened its huge mouth full of fangs and bit a Bu Fong. Anyone who tried to steal the heaven and earth obsidian flames must die. Chapter 353. Within the gigantic pit of fire, the sound of raging flames resounded incessantly. Waves of fire towered to the sky. Although they were ferocious, everyone could sense that these waves of fire had lost their spirit. Without the heaven and earth obsidian flames, the flames within the pit of fire lost their spirit and turned into ordinary flames. And this fire was no longer the focus of their attention. The ground was riddled with craters, broken rocks, and cracks were everywhere. A human-shaped hole had appeared in the ground, but the puppet that was struck down by the Azura's Gate, overlord from the sky, was nowhere to be seen. Everyone took a deep breath, then exhaled, spitting out the shock in their hearts. They were truly astounded. Whether it was Bu Fong eating fire or the iron lump puppet that fought against 5 people, they had all witnessed something they had never seen before. And the expressions on their faces were fascinating. The 10,000 bestial flames, which so many supreme beings were fighting for, was stolen by a 7th-grade battle saint and completely eaten. These supreme beings felt as if they had been slapped in the face. Yi Xiling was extremely excited, her tiny fists clenched tightly. Honorbu was indeed formidable. No, Honorbu was becoming more and more formidable. Yi Xiling recalled the first time she met Honorbu. At that time, Honorbu was still very weak. Xiaobai was also formidable, adorable, and powerful. She couldn't wait to rush to the imperial city of the Light Wind Empire to meet Honorbu. She had the urge to meet her idol. And Yi Xiling tilted her head and thought for a moment. Then she narrowed her eyes. Should she tell Sister and I, Yin, about what happened here? Yi Yanqing was so frightened that all the fat on his body was trembling. With trembling hands, he took out a dragon liver popsicle from his spatial ring and fiercely took a bite. This is too terrifying. That kid doesn't even let fire go. Is there anything on this continent that he can't eat? Compared to the fire-eating Honorbu, it was better for him to eat a dragon liver popsicle to calm his nerves. Duan Yin watched from afar as Bufang tore apart the 10,000 bestial flames and swallowed it with his own eyes. Suddenly, his entire body trembled. He thought of many things. He thought of the scene where Bufang knocked him out with a black wok and forced him to roast sweet potatoes with Dan fire. Fortunately, he had agreed. If he hadn't, wouldn't that fellow have eaten his alchemic fire? What a monster! Thinking to this point, he suddenly couldn't help but laugh. He looked at the supreme existences in the sky who were angry and embarrassed, and he felt a little carefree. A large group of supreme beings were fooled by a 7th grade battle saint. Interesting. Wu Mu leaned on the cloud, rising sword, and laughed heartily. Even though he coughed up blood from time to time, he felt extremely carefree. He knew that if the 10,000 bestial flames were to fall into the hands of the Shura sect demons, the consequences would be dire. This was the best outcome he could hope for, especially the failure of the Shura sect sovereign to break through the supreme being's shackles. This was what excited him the most. Duan Ling hovered in the air, tightly grasping the blood-colored Shura sect sword. His complexion was extremely unsightly, as if he had been smeared with charcoal. He clenched his fists so tightly that his veins were exposed. Wu Mu's loud laughter echoed in his ears. It was like a blatant mockery, and it incited the flames of anger in his chest. He raised his head and felt the hot wind blowing against his face. His ice-cold eyes swept across the crowd and landed on Wu Mu. Are you laughing at me? I haven't settled the score with you for obstructing me, Duan Ling coldly said. Then he raised the Shura sect sword and tapped the air with the tip of his foot. The air rippled. Duan Ling's speed was extremely fast, and he charged toward Wu Mu with a sweeping killing intent. His killing intent was truly overflowing. If it weren't for this fellow obstructing him, how could he have allowed the 10,000 bestial flames to be eaten by an ant-like existence? This was all because of Wu Mu. Kill. Buzz. A peculiar pressure emerged from Duan Ling's body. This pressure caused Wu Mu's eyes to widen, and he felt as if his chest was being crushed by a huge rock. The pressure of heaven and earth. A 10th grade divine expert could control the power of heaven and earth to form a pressure of heaven and earth. This was the difference between a supreme being and a divine expert. Even though Duan Ling had failed in his breakthrough, he was still half a step into the divine realm. This level of cultivation was enough to crush Wu Mu. In the face of the pressure of heaven and earth formed by the power of heaven and earth, Wu Mu felt as if his limbs were so heavy that he couldn't even lift them. Was he going to die? Numerous jade talismans fell from the sky and shielded his body. These jade talismans transformed into a magic array and wrapped around Wu Mu, helping him block Duan Ling's sword. As Wu Mu advanced, the formation formed by the jade talismans continuously exploded, emitting a series of explosive sounds. The Celestial Arcanum Sect's Supreme Elder wore a grave expression. His wrinkled face trembled slightly. When the last magic array was destroyed by Duan Ling's sword, the Supreme Elder's complexion turned pale, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Wu Mu's breathing was chaotic. He was already severely injured and couldn't withstand this sword. It seemed like he was really going to die here. All of a sudden, a snake-like cry came from his side. Then, a curved long sword appeared in front of him, blocking his path. With a clang, it was sent flying by the Shurasek's sword and shattered into pieces. The Serpentine Sovereign's serpent tail tumbled, and her body was sent flying. Her beautiful and delicate face was as pale as a sheet of paper. Wumu was dumbfounded. He looked at the Serpentine Sovereign with a complicated expression. When he saw the Shurasek's sword shatter the snake-shaped, long sword into pieces, his heart was filled with mixed feelings. After Duan Ling was obstructed, the pressure of heaven and earth dissipated. After all, he hadn't completely broken through the Supreme Being's shackles and was severely injured. He only had the power to launch a single sword attack. Unfortunately, it was blocked. His eyes were still as cold as ever. As he swept his gaze across the audience, everyone's heart palpitated. Blood-colored jade talismans floated in the air. Her sparkling and translucent feet stepped on these jade talismans and rose into the air. The high priestess appeared beside Duan Ling. Her eyes, which were hidden under the mask, were emotionless. The jade talismans swirled and covered both of their bodies. Then, with a gust of wind and a flash of light, the talisman array that covered both of their bodies flew far away from the fiery pit. The Shurasect overlord had escaped. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Bei Gongming sat on the ground. His whole body was trembling. Only now did he have the leisure to turn his head and look at his surroundings. His pupils constricted when he saw it, because many disciples had died in this battle. This was an extremely tragic battle. Even though none of the Supreme Beings had fallen, every single one of them was severely injured. Many 8th grade war gods had fallen as well. Bei Gongming, who was feeling sorrowful, suddenly froze. The 10,000 bestial flames. The 10,000 bestial flames. The guy probably used some secret technique to subdue it. If I inform the sect, even if I can't obtain the 10,000 bestial flames, I still have a chance to obtain a reward. The appearance of a half-step divine warrior in the training ground made Bei Gongming give up on the idea of snatching the 10,000 bestial flames. Even if it was just a half-step divine warrior, he was still not someone he could deal with. As a disciple of the Grand Baron's sect, he clearly knew how terrifying a divine warrior could be. The imperial city of the Light Wind Empire. The sky was shrouded in darkness. The bright moon hung high in the sky. In front of the store, rays of light suddenly appeared, followed by a fierce gust of wind. Blackie, who was sleeping soundly by the door, was suddenly awakened by the gust of wind. It lazily opened its doggy eyes and gazed at the magic array that was gradually emerging. Its doggy mouth twitched. The magic array was quickly formed. A tornado whizzed by, and a figure descended from the magic array. With a bang, the figure landed on his but in front of Blackie. Bufong sat on the ground, but he couldn't feel any pain. The only sensation he felt was a scorching heat. Even though he had the cultivation technique provided by the system, he still felt like he was on fire. It was as if his stomach was about to be burned to ashes. His vision was blurry and misty. He scanned his surroundings and realized that he wasn't in his own room. It seemed like the system had accidentally teleported him to the wrong location. Bufong tried to stand up, but his legs felt weak, and he sat on the ground again. Blackie looked at Owner Boo, who looked like he was drunk, and immediately rolled its eyes. Where did this kid go to have fun and come back? He actually ran to the Lord Go and acted like a drunkard. Bufong's face turned red and his eyes suddenly widened. He turned his head and glared at the plump dog. Blackie's nose twitched. What was this kid trying to do? Gulp. Bufong felt his stomach churn. He finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He puffed up his mouth, widened his eyes, and spat in the direction of the plump dog. Bang! Blackie didn't expect Bufong to dare to spit at him. He actually dared to spit at the Lord Go. Moreover, the thing he spat out was actually fire. You brat, after having fun, you came back to perform acrobatics? This flame. Wait, damn it. It's the heaven and earth obsidian flame. The Lord Go let out an exasperated bark and immediately jumped up from the ground. His lazy figure jumped up and down to extinguish the flame that enveloped the dog's head. The heaven and earth obsidian flame was a flame formed by gathering the energy of heaven and earth. It almost burnt the Lord Go's gorgeous dog fur black. After spitting out a mouthful of flame, Bufong felt much better. Exhaling, Bufong stood up. Bufong rubbed Black's head and patted his stomach. He walked back into the store with a constipated expression. The black puppy was speechless. Looking at the swaying Bufong, it thought for a moment, then snorted and continued lying on the ground. However, just as it lay down, a loud thud resounded. A lump of iron fell from the sky, creating a big hole in the ground in front of it. Rubble flew everywhere. Xiaobai rubbed its round head and stood up from the deep hole. Its mechanical eyes flashed with red, purple, and gray lights. Standing up, it felt dizzy. Blackish shook its body to shake off the rubble on its body. It bares doggy teeth and was so angry. Can't you let this dog sleep well? Chapter 354. Bufong swayed as he returned to the store. Xiaobai followed behind him, who was swaying as well. Bufong felt as though there was a giant whirlpool spinning in his head. It made him dizzy, and he couldn't even walk properly. Bufong hadn't experienced such a feeling for a long time. The last time he experienced such a feeling was when he had a fever in his previous life. Passing through the store, Bufong went up the stairs and returned to his room. Back in his room, Bufong swayed as he walked a few steps. Then, he lay on his bed and fell asleep. The three colors in Xiaobai's eyes were constantly changing. Finally, he stepped into the kitchen and quietly stayed in a corner. However, there seemed to be some subtle changes happening in his body. Blackie let out a snort as the fats on its body gently trembled, shaking off the crushed rocks on its body. Once again, it became black and plump. Blackie opened its mouth and yawned. Then it once again fell back into a deep sleep. The 100,000 mountains continued to rumble. A loud sound accompanied by the croaking of a frog could be heard. A giant one-legged toad jumped out of the 100,000 mountains and landed on the plain. Immediately, the ground shook violently. The one-legged toad rolled its eyes. The experts from the godly temple of the wildlands were standing on top of its head. The experts from the godly temple of the wildlands had unwilling expressions on their faces. They looked in the direction of the light, wind empire. They didn't know who Bufong was. However, they had heard rumors about Bufong. He was a chef who owned a mysterious and powerful puppet. Such a chef could only be the black-hearted owner of the Light Wind Empire's imperial capital. However, no matter what kind of owner he was, he had to be prepared to be hunted down by the supreme beings since he dared to snatch the heaven and earth obsidian flames from a group of supreme beings. Rumor had it that there was a powerful supreme beast in the store that killed that Shurist sect venerable. It just so happened that the Shurist sect sovereign was even angrier this time. The anger of a half-step divine expert wasn't something an ordinary person could withstand. They could fish in troubled waters. Roar! A dragon roar resounded as heat waves surged out from the 100,000 mountains. A huge scarlet fire dragon spread its meaty wings and flapped them as it flew out rapidly. This supreme fire dragon spewed out flames from its mouth from time to time, and its lantern-like eyes were filled with rage. The thing that it had guarded for so long had been snatched away by someone else. Naturally, it wouldn't be happy about it. Since it wasn't happy, it would kill its way out of the 100,000 mountains. That was what it was guarding. That was its opportunity. Those who snatched the dragon's fortuitous encounter would not rest until they were dead. Roar! There was another roar, and dense flames gushed out of the fire dragon's mouth. With a flap of its fleshy wings, it whizzed across the sky above the western mystery city. One figure after another walked out from the 100,000 mountains. Their auras were incomparably tyrannical. Yi Yanqing rode on the back of the ardent sunbird and hurried on his way. This time, he was obviously going to the Light Wind Imperial City. The corners of his mouth twitched because he knew that the Light Wind Imperial capital, which had just been stabilized, was going to suffer again. Yi Yanqing suddenly sympathized with the emperor of the Light Wind Empire. This emperor's life was full of misfortunes. Yi Xiling didn't go to the Light Wind Imperial capital. Instead, she passed by the Western Mystery City and entered it. And Yin was overseeing the city, and it just so happened that Yi Xiling had a secret to share with her. A sword light streaked across the sky. Wu Mu swallowed several elixirs, and his injuries were slightly healed. He was finally able to ride his sword and fly back. Beside him was the Serpentine Sovereign. Her voluptuous figure and beautiful face were as cold as ice. Wu Mu, I have already found my successor. When I return, I will leave the Grand Serpentine City and prepare to leave the southern region. I will head to an even vaster continent to search for an opportunity to break through. The Serpentine Sovereign's tender red lips parted slightly. She didn't even look at Wu Mu as she spoke calmly. Wu Mu was taken aback. When he was about to say something, he was interrupted by the Serpentine Sovereign. We probably won't have the chance to meet again in the future. Let's not meet again, the Serpentine Sovereign said coldly. Then, her figure sped up, and she quickly scuttled away, quickly disappearing. Wu Mu's face was filled with embarrassment. He looked at the disappearing figure of the Serpentine Sovereign and sighed with a complicated gaze. A lonely figure was slowly walking across the vast and boundless northwest plains. Duan Yun grabbed a spirit beast leg that had been roasted by alchemic fire and tore at it. As he tore at it, he slowly walked into the distance at an unhurried pace. Oh, the taste of meat roasted by this alchemic fire is really good. Should I change my occupation in the future and become a chef? I might have a bright future. Why don't I become an alchemist? Duan Yun laughed at himself. A light flickered in his eyes as he continued walking forward. A figure appeared in his mind. That unrestrained figure that tore at the heaven and earth obsidian flames. Duan Yun's body slightly trembled as he thought about it. Chefs nowadays were really terrifying. Western Mystery City. A white-haired and white-browed old man slowly walked into the city lord's mansion. And Yin listened to Yi Xiling's vivid description. Her beautiful eyes widened and her small mouth opened slightly. Her face was filled with disbelief. You said that Onurbu has already lost his mind and started eating fire? Can fire really be eaten? Aya, big sister and Yin, you didn't see it. Onurbu tore at the heaven and earth obsidian flames like he was eating roasted meat. The main point is Xiao Bai, okay? Xiao Bai is really amazing. He fought against 5 people by himself. Yi Xiling's eyes lit up as she excitedly said to Yin. Compared to Bu Fong eating fire, this girl was more concerned about Xiao Bai's handsomeness when he fought against 5 people. Those were 5 supreme being existences. They weren't some random trash. Any one of those existences could shake the entire Light Wind Empire. And Yin rubbed her smooth chin and smacked her lips. Onurbu actually went to the 100,000 mountains to fight for fire and even swallowed the heaven and earth obsidian flames into his stomach. What was he trying to do? Soon, Yin's eyes lit up. Who was Onurbu? It was a chef. What did a chef need fire for? Of course, it was to cook. Could it be that Onurbu came up with a new dish that required the use of the heaven and earth obsidian flames? Yin thought about Bu Fong's culinary skills and the fragrance of the dishes. She couldn't help but lick her red lips with her bright tongue. She was so excited and wanted to eat it. Yi Xiling speechlessly held her forehead. When she saw Yin's expression, she knew that this woman couldn't help but want to eat again. Yin was indeed the celestial arcanum sex big foodie. She could compete with her unreliable grandfather. Just when the two of them were chatting excitedly, Yin's crystal-clear ears suddenly twitched and she furrowed her brows. She actually received a message from the Supreme Elder. The Supreme Elder was actually in the Western Mystery City. Yin didn't dare to delay and brought Yi Xiling to look for the Supreme Elder. In the middle of the night, the Western Mystery City's gate opened and 3 figures galloped out of the city, heading straight for the Imperial City. The Imperial City of the Light Wind Empire, at this moment, became the focus of the southern region after the army attacked the city. If Ji Qingxuan knew about this, he wouldn't know whether he should cry or not. The first ray of the morning sun shone through the window and into the small room, dispelling the chill that had enveloped the room for an entire night. The motionless figure lying on the bed suddenly trembled. Bu Fong slowly opened his eyes. He was finally alive. His hair was a little messy, and his eyes were a little misty. Rubbing his slightly swollen temples, Bufong sat up straight and let out a long breath. His mouth was dry, and his throat was a little sore and itchy. Getting up from the bed, Bufong walked into the bathroom while rubbing his head. After taking a hot shower to sober himself up, Bufong walked out with his hair dripping wet. Bufong stretched his body a little, and he seemed to hear the sound of his bones colliding with each other. Slightly raising his eyebrows, Bufong clenched his fists and realized that his body was much stronger than before. It seemed that eating the heaven and earth obsidian flame had the health benefits of strengthening the body. Thinking of the heaven and earth obsidian flame, Bufong's mind suddenly moved. He sank into his body and began to check the whereabouts of the flame he ate. Whether or not it was subdued by him would determine whether or not he could use the Black Turtle constellation walk to cook. Just as he was about to check, the solemn and serious voice of the system rang in his mind. Chapter 355. Bufong, who refused to believe it, began to try to control it. He tried all kinds of methods, but the ball of arrogant flame remained in his dantian. This is sweet in sour dragon ribs, the Lord Go's favorite. Woof. With a faint smile, Bufong walked back into the store, pulled a chair, and curled up in front of the store. He watched as the Lord Go gobbled up the food, smelled the aroma of the dishes in the air, and basked in the warm sunlight. Life was infinitely better. After stirring the starch juice, Bufong smeared a layer of starch on the earth dragon ribs, which had been cut into pieces. Bufong was ready to start the main event. Bufong clicked his tongue in wonder, and his heart was filled with delight as he admired this beautiful ball of flame. Bufong stuffed the ribs into his mouth and couldn't help but squint his eyes. Before this, he had always used this wok to smash people, and Bufong was a little embarrassed to do so. With his current cultivation of a 7th grade battle saint, it was easy for him to use inner sight. Even so, there was a layer of medium between them, so there was still a difference when it came to controlling the ribs. Once the ribs entered the wok, the spirit energy gushing out became turbulent and was about to rush out of the wok. The system's voice was still solemn and earnest, but Bufong's eyebrows twitched, and he was quite excited. Bufong skillfully scooped out the pieces of meat. The steaming pieces of meat hovered above the kitchen, accompanied by a rich aroma that seemed to be on the verge of materializing. It stuck out its tongue, twitched its nose, and let out an intoxicated barking. Bufong didn't know that if the supreme beings heard his thoughts, he would most likely be beaten to death with a gunny sack. The Lord Go snorted inwardly, and then began to gobble down the food from the porcelain bowl. He poured the oil into the Black Turtle constellation wok, and with a thought, he increased the heat. The temperature of the oil in the wok rose rapidly. Congratulations to the host for subduing the heaven and earth obsidian flame, the 10,000 bestial flame. The 10,000 bestial flame is a heaven and earth obsidian flame born from the accumulation of the spirit chi of heaven and earth. Its power is boundless, and it can incinerate anything. Now that the host has devoured the 10,000 bestial flame, you need to focus on refining it to reach the realm where you can control it freely. Black's originally hazy eyes widened the moment it smelled the aroma of the sweet and sour dragon ribs. After just one round, Bufong's face turned red. Bufong put the earth dragon ribs wrapped in starch into it. The orange-red juice stained the meat, and as Bufong picked it up, it actually pulled out a sticky thread. Chi, chi, chi. When the door was opened, the rich aroma of steaming hot sweet and sour dragon ribs wafted out. With a flick of the knife, he cut open the ribs and flesh of the rank 8 earth dragon. Then, he patted it with the kitchen knife, making the dragon meat more loose and improving the taste. Boom! Once the flame appeared, the temperature in the kitchen instantly rose. It was extremely terrifying. The alley around the store had been rebuilt. After Bufong looked around, he placed the sweet-in, sour dragon ribs in front of Blackie, who was snoring loudly. Bufong's mouth twitched, and his eyes rolled. Then he took out a big wok. This wasn't the Black Turtle Constellation wok, so he decided to try it with another wok. This rank 8 sweet and sour dragon ribs was the first dish cooked with the Black Turtle Constellation wok, and this fat dog actually benefited from it. In his eyes, there was only sweet and sour dragon ribs. Bufong shut his mouth and coughed a few times. He had just learned how to breathe fire, so he was still not used to it. Opening his eyes, Bufong rubbed his chin. The god of cooking set paired with the heaven and earth obsidian flame was indeed extraordinary. Bufong was stunned for a moment, and he frowned. He didn't think too much about it, and his mind tried to control the proud flame while practicing his knife and carving skills. From afar, Xiao Xiaolong slowly walked over. His complexion wasn't good, and there was a hint of sorrow in his eyes. He spat out a mouthful of heaven and earth obsidian flame, and it actually went under the Black Turtle Constellation wok. Even though Bufong didn't really care about it, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up into a smile. He was still a little happy because with the 10,000 bestial flames, he would be able to activate the heaven and earth metamorphosis wok. Bufong's whole body turned red. He opened his mouth, and golden flames were spat out toward the bottom of the big wok. Bufong's heart was filled with delight. His cooking skills had obviously improved again. The flames quietly burned at the bottom of the wok. The Black Turtle Constellation wok floated in the air, and the golden flames were quietly burning, not making any sound. He widened his eyes, and his face was filled with a strange expression. Steam billowed out, rolling up. Green smoke curled up from his right hand, and the pitch-black, unadorned Black Turtle Constellation wok floated above his palm. Bufong calmed his mind once more, and he activated his inner vision. Only Bufong, who had the special technique provided by the system, could shamelessly swallow the 10,000 bestial flames. Then, with a thought, he tried to control the 10,000 bestial flames residing in his dantian. And this plate of sweet and sour dragon meat ribs was the first dish cooked by the Black Turtle Constellation wok. The taste was so good that Bufong couldn't believe it. At this moment, his mouth was still lingering with the dragon meat's fragrance. The soft and tender dragon meat, the fragrant sweet and sour sauce, and the abundant spirit energy complemented each other, forming the exquisite sweet and sour dragon meat ribs. In just an instant, a rich aroma wafted out from the wok. Green smoke curled up from his hand, and the dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. The 10,000 bestial flames looked so awesome, but it turned out to be nothing more than this. Bufong was startled, and he hurriedly covered his mouth. While chewing, he carried the cooked sweet and sour ribs out of the kitchen. Bufong's face stiffened. He actually couldn't control the 10,000 bestial flames. Bufong continued to cook unhurriedly. Even supreme being experts wouldn't dare to approach it, let alone subdue it. After the first piece of sweet and sour ribs entered his mouth, the Lord Go's widened eyes widened even more. His eyes sparkled with a light that even he couldn't believe. As he practiced, Bufong's heart suddenly moved. He recalled the technique provided by the system to subdue the heaven and earth obsidian flames yesterday. Bufong exhaled, patted his cheeks, then turned around and walked down the stairs. Xiao Xiaolong wasn't here. Why wasn't he here at this hour? At this moment, the temperature within his body was extremely scorching. The true energy flowing within his dantian was like a flame. Moreover, the pale white true energy from before seemed to have been dyed, turning into a resplendent golden color. This made Bufong's heart shudder. Then, an unconcealable excitement and hope appeared in his eyes. The energy vortex in his dantian was slowly rotating, and in the center of the vortex floated a throbbing golden flame. In just a short while, the wok turned red, and with a sizzling sound, a hole was burned through it. Under the Black Turtle Constellation wok, there were 4 small feet that looked like they were made of bronze. When the flames surged into them, the patterns on the 4 small feet began to shine brightly. It was as if there was an invisible wave that was controlling the flames that were gushing out. Compared to the spirit pork, the earth dragon meat was even more delicious. After all, it was an 8th-grade ingredient. Smacking his lips, Bufong used his chopsticks to pick up a piece of sweet and sour ribs. Moreover, with the help of the Black Turtle constellation wok, the meat in the wok was cooked in no time. With a thought, the obsidian flame surged. What was going on? Why did the flame come out from his mouth? With a swoosh, Blackie pulled the porcelain plate into its bosom, its dog eyes emitting a brilliant radiance. Bufong was startled. Did such a high-temperature flame really come out from his mouth? Looking at Bufong, who was curled up in front of the store, he was taken aback. Could it be that the Black Turtle constellation wok was destined to be used as a brick by him? Following the circulation method of the technique, Bufong once again activated the true energy in his body. At the same time, he tried to activate the 10,000 bestial flames. Feeling an itch in his throat, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of pale, golden flame. His mouth. Why wasn't it burnt? This was the 8th grade earth dragon meat, and the spirit energy contained within it was no small matter. He subdued the 10,000 bestial flames just like that. This was too easy, wasn't it? Bufong poured the sweet in sour ribs on top of the earth dragon ribs. Within a short period of time, Bufong's hands seemed to have left streaks of light and shadows as he mixed the sweet and sour ribs. The mixture of the sweet and sour ribs and the ribs was just right. He wanted to see if the obsidian flames of heaven and earth could activate the Black Turtle constellation wok. With a ladle, a spoonful of sweet and sour tangerine sauce was ready. The moment the ingredients were poured into the wok, Bufong's pupils shrank. A burst of flame emerged from the wok. This was much easier than cooking with an ordinary iron wok. If he were to use his true energy to cook with an ordinary wok, he would need to calm his mind and have intimate contact with the wok. However, no matter how he tried, the 10,000 bestial flames showed no signs of moving. Bufong placed his palm on top of the Black Turtle constellation wok and immediately felt a gust of faint heat gushing out. His heart was instantly filled with joy. He really activated it. What did it mean by no difficulty? Although the 10,000 bestial flames had just been born and was still a fire seed, no matter how weak it was still an obsidian flame of heaven and earth with boundless power. This time it was too much. He couldn't even activate the fire, let alone activate the Black Turtle constellation wok. That was the obsidian flame of heaven and earth, the 10,000 bestial flames. Pouring out the oil from the Black Turtle constellation wok, Bufong began to cook the sweet in sour sauce. Stinking brat, at least you have a conscience. The meat of the 8th grade earth dragon was much tougher than pork. However, after being fried, Bufong was extremely adept at controlling the heat. The earth dragon's meat became fatty and tender. Although it was his first time using the Black Turtle constellation wok, thanks to the God of Cooking set, he could clearly feel every change in the energy in the wok. Bufong stroked Blackie's head and said calmly. The excited Bufong's eyes lit up. Blackie, who had been too lazy to speak, couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Its voice was still full of magnetism. Pouring the sweet and sour ribs into a blue and white porcelain plate, the aroma was several times stronger than the previous one. Bufong couldn't help but want to try it. He had been eyeing that wok for a long time. After all, this was a wok, not a brick. Rumble, rumble. The meat rolled rapidly in the wok, and the earth dragon's meat, which was wrapped in starch, gradually turned golden. Even the slightest difference would affect the taste of the dish. Above the Black Turtle constellation wok, there seemed to be a gigantic spirit turtle the size of a mountain, suppressing the gushing spirit energy. The spirit energy actually fled back into the wok. Blackie was completely captivated. In front of this delicacy, there was nothing else in its eyes. The energy whirlpool revolved around the golden flame. From time to time, it would extract a bit of energy from the golden flame and fuse it into the true energy whirlpool. With a thought, the Black Turtle constellation wok expanded, becoming the size of a normal wok. Blackie, time to eat. This aroma was really mesmerizing. After dealing with the wok, Bufong thought for a while and took out a piece of earth dragon's meat from the system's dimensional storage. This was the rib meat of an earth dragon. Chapter 356. Xiao Xiaolong was in a bad state for the past few days. Even though he would follow Bu Fong's instructions to cook and do business at Fong Fong's little store every day, he was mentally exhausted. As Xiao Meng's condition continued to deteriorate, the poison was getting deeper and deeper. His aura was getting weaker and weaker, and he was not far from death. Even though the emperor had arranged for the imperial physicians to treat Xiao Meng every day, the imperial physicians were already helpless and could only sigh endlessly. Since his father was about to die, how could he, as a son, be happy? That was why he had been in a trance for the past few days. However, there was always hope in his heart. Before Bu Fong left, he had told him that when Bu Fong returned, he might be able to cure his father. Xiao Xiaolong had always remembered this sentence, so he had been looking forward to Bu Fong's early return. Although Bu Fong had only left for less than half a month, in this half a month, he had been living a torturous life. Owner Bu, you're finally back. Xiao Xiaolong was so excited that his eyes suddenly became a little red. Bu Fong was curled up in his chair. When he saw Xiao Xiaolong, he wanted to greet him. However, he did not expect Xiao Xiaolong to have such a big reaction, which scared him. After Xiao Xiaolong finished speaking, Bu Fong finally understood what was going on. General Xiao Meng was still poisoned by the surest sect. Bu Fong remembered and immediately sighed. Looking at Xiao Xiaolong's hopeful expression, Bu Fong simply said, "It's all right. After today's opening hours, I will accompany you to see if I could detoxify the poison." Xiao Meng and Bu Fong could be considered old friends, so Bu Fong could not just watch him die from the poison. After Xiao Xiaolong received Bu Fong's confirmation, he was immediately overjoyed. His whole body became more energetic, and he excitedly entered the kitchen to practice. Bu Fong continued to lie on the chair leisurely, looking at the white clouds drifting across the sky from time to time. He squinted his eyes and enjoyed the rare tranquility. It had been a long time since the last time the army attacked the city. The customers in the store were gradually returning. Many customers who came to the store to eat would greet Bu Fong with a smile when they saw Bu Fong curled up on the chair. Bu Fong would occasionally nod in response. "Owner Bu, long time no see. What kind of delicacies have you been researching recently?" Fatty Jean walked over from the alley with his army of fatties and greeted Bu Fong with a smile. He was already a regular customer. Although Bu Fong's restaurant was becoming more and more famous, Bu Fong's reputation was also gradually spreading throughout the entire imperial city. However, Fatty Jean didn't care much because he was just a customer who came to eat at the restaurant. Ouyang Xiaoi eagerly walked in. The moment she entered the store, she saw Bu Fong and screamed. Bu Fong lazily glanced at the little girl. He discovered that the little girl was actually getting taller and more slender and elegant. After exchanging a few words with the little girl, Bu Fong stood up from the chair. After stretching his body, he walked into the kitchen. Through the kitchen window, Ouyang Xiaoi told him many of the customers' orders. Bu Fong looked through them and cooked together with Xiao Xiaolong. He didn't choose to use the Black Turtle constellation wok, nor did he use the Heaven and Earth obsidian flame. He just cooked normally. However, even so, the dishes cooked by Bu Fong were still overflowing with fragrance. The fragrance lingered in the entire kitchen and even drifted into the store. Owner Bu personally cooked, and the customers were extremely excited. It was an extremely rare opportunity to be able to taste the dishes cooked by Owner Bu. After the store became famous, more and more people came because of its reputation. There were even people who traveled thousands of miles from other counties just to have a taste of the restaurant's dishes. The dishes didn't disappoint them. Although Xiao Xiaolong was the one cooking most of the time, his cooking skills improved rapidly under Bu Fong's strict training. Of course, the majority of people still wanted to taste the dishes cooked by Owner Bu. According to rumors, the cooking skills of Owner Bu of Fong Fong's little store were the best in the entire empire. To be able to taste the dishes cooked by Owner Bu once, one could brag about it for 3 years. The atmosphere of the store was quite good. After the opening hours ended, there were still many people queuing up outside the store. When they found out that the store's opening hours ended, they felt regretful. However, they didn't choose to cause trouble and left one after another. Bufang wiped off the water stains on his hands and walked out of the kitchen with a few oyster pancakes. Xiao Xiaolong could not wait to follow behind him. After passing an oyster pancake to Ouyang Xiaoi, Bufang pulled over a chair and sat down. He took a bite of the oyster pancake, and the plump oyster immediately entered his mouth. Thick steam began to spread, and the aroma filled the air. Ouyang Xiaoi had already eagerly sat down and started eating. Although Xiao Xiaolong was anxious, he felt helpless when he saw Bufang's unhurried manner. He also started eating the oyster pancake. The oyster pancake was made by Bufang. It was rich in spirit energy, and not only was it delicious, but it also made Xiao Xiaolong and Ouyang Xiaoi feel exhausted after eating it. After they finished eating the oyster pancake, Bufang glanced at the impatient Xiao Xiaolong and slowly stood up. He changed his clothes, closed the store's doors, and followed Xiao Xiaolong and Ouyang Xiaoi toward the general's manor. When Ouyang Xiaoi found out that Bufang was going to treat Xiaoming, she immediately eagerly wanted to follow him. The Ouyang family and the Xiao family had a good relationship. When Ouyang Xiaoi found out that Xiaoming was going to die, she was sad for a while. Now that she knew that Owner Bu had a way to treat Xiaoming, she was naturally excited. Looking at Bufang, her eyes flickered continuously. The smelly boss was getting more and more powerful. The three of them entered the Xiao mansion. It was Bufang's first time entering the general's manor, so he was naturally curious. The complex buildings were like a maze, causing Bufang to feel dizzy and disoriented. However, with Xiao Xiaolong leading the way, they soon arrived at Xiaoming's room. In front of Xiaoming's room, there was a group of people. Xiao Yinyu, whom Bufang had not seen for a long time, was also standing there. However, her complexion was not good, and her beautiful face was haggard. When Bufang saw Xiao Yinyu also saw Bufang. She was slightly startled, then her red lips slightly parted as if she had thought of something. A trace of excitement appeared on her face. Light Wind Empire, Main Hall. Ji Qingxue spent the past half a month in comfort and contentment. Ji Qingyu's army retreated, and the Empire's army followed up with a victorious pursuit. The Empire's army gradually gained the upper hand. The experts of the other forces in the Imperial City also left, and the Imperial City finally returned to its original state. Ji Qingxue reclined on the dragon throne, and a gentle and beautiful woman was massaging his temples with her jade-like fingers to relieve his fatigue. As the emperor of an empire, there were 3,000 beauties in his harem. Even though he had been busy with the empire's court affairs, he still had a few concubines. When he was tired, he would also let these concubines relieve his fatigue. Reporting, Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Just as Ji Qingxue was quietly enjoying this rare moment of relaxation, a loud roar came from outside the main hall. He couldn't help but open his eyes. All he saw was a general guarding the city gate. His face was deathly pale, and his body was trembling uncontrollably as he tumbled and crawled into the main hall. What's wrong? Why are you so flustered? Ji Qingxue furrowed his brows and said unhappily, Your Majesty. The general's face was pale, and he said in fear. However, his voice was stuttering incessantly. Imperial. Outside the Imperial City, there's a huge spirit beast that's rapidly approaching. Ji Qingxue was stunned, and then his eyes widened. What spirit beast? Can you tell what grade it is? It had only been a short while, and yet another frightening spirit beast had appeared. To be able to make the general so flustered, this spirit beast was definitely not ordinary. Could it be another 7th grade spirit beast? Or an 8th grade spirit beast? The general swallowed a mouthful of saliva and looked at Ji Qingxue on the verge of tears. That spirit beast is too tall. It's as tall as a mountain covering the sky. Its strength is truly inestimable. I think it might be a supreme beast. A supreme beast? Ji Qingxue was stunned, and then his face turned pale. He slumped onto the chair as if all the energy in his body had been sucked out. Why was it so difficult to be an emperor? Even a supreme beast had come looking for trouble. The majestic imperial city. Several hundred miles away, a gigantic figure that blotted out the sky emerged. A loud bang resounded, and the ground trembled. Then, this gigantic figure soared into the sky and landed with a loud rumble. Its single thick and sturdy legs stomped on the ground, causing the ground to crack. Even the official road outside the imperial city crumbled under this stomp. A sky-shaking croak resounded. The one-legged toad's gigantic eyes turned, and its target was the light-wind imperial city. Croak! Chapter 357. Xiao Yinyu was pleasantly surprised as she looked at Bufang. Owner Bufang had finally appeared. Xiao Xiaolong had mentioned to her that Bufang had a way to cure her father's poison. However, Bufang had been gone for almost half a month. She was getting more and more anxious as she waited. She was afraid that if Bufang came back any later, her father would really die from the poison. Meeting Xiao Yinyu's somewhat excited gaze, Bufang calmly nodded his head. Bufang's calm demeanor made Xiao Yinyu feel at ease. The fear and uneasiness in her heart also strangely calmed down. Young Master Xiao, this is... Several elderly figures who were blocking the entrance were puzzled when they saw Xiao Xiaolong walking over with a young man. They were the imperial physicians sent by Ji Qingxue and are the most skilled elders in the imperial palace. These elders often stayed in the palace to study medicine and rarely paid attention to the outside world. Although they had heard of Fong Fong's little store, which had recently become popular throughout the Light Wind Empire, they did not know much about it. They did not know the owner Bufang either. Xiao Yinyu regained her senses and gently introduced Bufang to the imperial physicians. She still maintained a respectful attitude toward these imperial physicians. That was because during the time when Bufang was not in the imperial city, if it were not for these imperial physicians using their medical skills to preserve Xiao Meng's life, Xiao Meng would have already died from the torture of the poison. Therefore, she was very grateful toward these imperial physicians. This is the owner of Fong Fong's little store. He is here to treat my father today. Xiao Yinyu sincerely introduced. However, one of the old imperial physicians widened his eyes and looked Bufang up and down. Miss Xiao, which medical center is Fong Fong's little store? Why have I never heard of it? The imperial physician questioned. The other imperial physicians nodded in agreement. Xiao Yinyu was a little embarrassed. Fong Fong's little store is not a medical center. It is the most famous restaurant in the imperial city, Xiao Yinyu said. Restaurant? Are you joking? We are here to treat a patient, not to eat. Restaurant? Miss Xiao, treating an illness is not a joke. How could you bring someone here in such a ridiculous manner? A restaurant. The people inside are not doctors. They are chefs. That's right. Miss Xiao, have you ever seen a chef who can cure illnesses? Another old imperial physician said with dissatisfaction. Obviously, after these old pedants found out about Bufang's identity, they naturally doubted Bufang's identity. They sized up Bufang, shaking their heads as they did so. Bufang, on the other hand, was very natural. He indifferently glanced at the few old men, and then turned his head to look at Xiao Yinyu. Do you need my help? If not, I'll go back to sleep, Bufang said. Xiao Yinyu's complexion immediately changed. She did not have the time to explain too much to the imperial physicians and quickly brought Bufang into the room. The imperial physicians' expressions immediately became even uglier. Some of them even waved their sleeves and snorted coldly. Xiao Yinyu actually found a chef to treat General Zhao's illness. Wasn't this clearly showing that she looked down on them? Could it be that the medical skills of the imperial physicians were inferior to a chef who held a kitchen knife every day? What nonsense! At this moment, Xiao Xiaolong glanced at the few imperial physicians. His heart was unmoved, and he was not in the mood to explain anything. It was true that Onorbu did not know any medical skills, but he knew how to cook elixir cuisines. He had personally witnessed the effects of the elixir cuisines. Therefore, if he could not even count on Onorbu, how could he count on these imperial physicians who had already concluded that his father could not be saved? Xiao Yinyu brought Bu Fong into the room. The moment they entered, the room was filled with a strong and bitter smell of medicine. At the bedside, a haggard woman dressed in palace attire sat on the edge of the bed. Her face was filled with grief as she looked at Xiao Meng, who was lying on the bed. Ji Ruer's eyes were filled with pain, and her spirit was extremely haggard. It was obvious that she was overwhelmed with grief. She glanced at Bufong, but did not say anything. She pursed her chapped lips and continued to stare at Xiao Meng, who was lying on the bed. Xiao Yinyu sighed and felt a throbbing pain in her heart. Bufong walked to the bedside and glanced at Xiao Meng, who was lying on the bed. Xiao Meng's current condition was extremely poor. Most of his life force was fading away, and his entire face seemed to be filled with a dark aura. It was obvious that the poison had attacked his heart, and he was not far from death. Bufong's heart trembled. It seemed like he had to speed up his treatment if he wanted to save Xiao Meng. With his current condition, he could die at any moment. Xiao Yinyu looked at Bufong's furrowed brows, and she could not help but feel anxious. "Honor Bu, don't say anything first. Let me think," Bufong said calmly. According to the system's hint, if Bufong wanted to detoxify Xiao Meng's poison, he could only use a tyrannical method. Therefore, he might have to use the Black Turtle Constellation Wok to cook the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. The cooking method of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup was included in the recipe provided by the system. However, according to the system's introduction, the Buddha jumps over the wall soup was divided into 2 grades, human grade and heaven grade. This time, since he had the Black Turtle Constellation Wok, he could only cook the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. In order to cook the Buddha jumps over the wall soup, the ingredients were the most important. Bufong calmed his mind and studied the Buddha jumps over the wall soup's recipe provided by the system. He memorized all the required ingredients. After memorizing them, he compared them with the ingredients in the system's dimensional storage and estimated what he was missing. Remember the names of these ingredients and immediately send someone to collect them. The faster, the better. Bufong suddenly raised his head and said to Xiao Yinyu. Xiao Yinyu was taken aback for a moment. Then she solemnly nodded her head. 1 black spirit abalone, 1 tiger-striped shark's fin, 1 deep-sea thorn ginseng. Bufong listed out the ingredients one by one. These were all ingredients from the sea, and he rarely came into contact with them. Therefore, he did not have that many ingredients in the system's dimensional storage. As for the other spirit beast meat, he could use the dragon meat and other spirit beast meat in the system's dimensional storage as a substitute. Moreover, during his trip to the 100,000 Mountains, he had collected a lot of precious medicinal ingredients. These medicinal ingredients could be put to good use at crucial moments. Xiao Yin solemnly memorized them and then turned around to order someone to collect these ingredients. In the depths of the mountains, a pitch-black, ice-cold metal tower suddenly stood erect. Within the metal tower, the Shura sect overlord, Duan Ling, was sitting cross-legged. His eyes were tightly shut. Blood-colored true energy was rapidly stirring on his body, faintly discernible. From time to time, the clanking sounds of chains colliding could be heard coming from his left arm. These were the remnants of the Supreme Being's shackles that he had yet to break. These shackles restricted his cultivation and strength. Half a step into the divine realm, he was just a step away from breaking the Supreme Being's shackles and completely stepping into the 10th grade divine realm, becoming an existence that transcended mortals. Unfortunately, all of this was ruined by an ant at the level of a 7th grade battle saint. Up until now, he still could not understand how a mere 7th grade battle saint could actually eat a heaven and earth obsidian flame. This matter had been bothering him for a long time. After meditating for almost a day and swallowing a lot of elixirs, Duan Ling's backlash from forcefully breaking through had almost healed. The pressure emanating from his body had also become more terrifying. Once one stepped into the 10th grade divine realm, it was equivalent to transcending mortals. One could sense the power of heaven and earth and manipulate it to fight against enemies. Even a 9th grade supreme being at the peak of the 9th grade could only use the pressure of their true energy to suppress their enemies. However, The divine realm was different. Once they mobilized the pressure of heaven and earth, they could basically instantly kill a ninth-grade supreme being. Did you find out? Who was the bastard that dared to snatch the 10,000 bestial flames in front of me? Duan Ling slowly opened his eyes. The frightening light gradually dissipated. The high priestess waved a few blood-colored talismans in her hand. The talismans formed a peculiar magic array, expressing a peculiar meaning. Through sensing these meanings, the high priestess learned many things. After putting away the talismans, the high priestess's eyes, which were hidden under the mask, flickered. She said to Duan Ling, "I have deduced it. That kid is in the Imperial City. He is the owner of the store that killed a supreme being. He is the owner of the store that killed my subordinate. Enemies really do meet on a daily basis. This time, I will settle old scores and new scores at the same time." A murderous glint flashed in Duan Ling's eyes. He slowly stood up. The high priestess followed behind him and floated out of the metal tower. The metal tower shook for a while and then turned into a small tower. The high priestess put away. Duan Ling cast a glance in the direction of the Light Wind Empire and slightly narrowed his eyes. "Let's go. We will make a trip to the Light Wind Empire. We must take back the 10,000 bestial flames and avenge the Supreme Being's life." Duan Ling stood with his hands clasped behind his back. As his voice fell, a murderous aura gushed out from his body and engulfed the surroundings. He took a step forward and transformed into a blood-colored stream of light. In an instant, he disappeared into the distance. Only his faint voice still lingered in the air. This time, let the entire Imperial City be buried with the Supreme Being. Let the entire southern region know that the surest sect has returned. Chapter 358. Ji Qingxue was slightly taken aback. He raised his head and saw a few figures with powerful muscles twisting around them. The populace below fled in fright. Fortunately, Ji Qingxue had evacuated the area beforehand, so not many people were trampled to death by the foot. Although he was the emperor, his strength was lacking. He could only be crushed by these supreme beings and supreme beasts. The terrifying aura of the supreme beasts gradually spread out and enveloped the entire Imperial City. "I know that Bufang must be in the Imperial City. Hand him over. Make him obediently hand over the 10,000 bestial flames, and we will retreat. Otherwise, the Supreme Toad will trample the Imperial City a few times, and your Imperial City will be destroyed in a day." Suddenly, the whistling of arrows and the snapping of bowstrings rang out. Countless arrows poured down from the city walls, as if they had turned into a rain of arrows that filled the sky, shooting toward the one-legged toad. Boom! He was thinking about the cooking method of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. Such a behemoth stepping into the imperial capital was simply the imperial capital's nightmare. However, the gale weakened when it was a few meters away from the store and then dissipated. The one-legged toad rolled its eyes and looked at Bufang. It panicked for no reason and immediately let out a deafening croak. When Bufang walked out of the Shao mansion, the toad sensed his aura and immediately rushed into the city. The one-legged toad landed on the ground once again. This time, the feeling of landing was even more obvious. The entire imperial city seemed to tremble. Swish, swish, swish. The populace in the imperial city also sensed the sudden appearance of the towering, mountain-like spirit beast toad outside the city. The supreme beast was several dozen meters tall, and its body seemed to be surrounded by floating clouds. Why would such an existence come to the imperial city? Damn it, why did it come to find Ownerbu again? The one-legged toad was a supreme beast, so it was extremely sensitive to auras. The tranquil and peaceful days were broken once again. Did the imperial city have a grudge against it? The terrifying and sinister appearance of the one-legged toad struck fear into the hearts of the people in the imperial capital. All of a sudden, the imperial physicians angrily flung their sleeves and said, "Although we don't have a solution, it's even more impossible for a chef like you to have a solution." Everyone stared at the terrifying one-legged toad, their hearts trembling. There weren't many ingredients, and he only had one chance. Therefore, even if it was Bufong, he had to treat it with caution. They were doctors, the imperial physicians of the imperial capital, the best doctors in the entire Light Wind Empire. If even they were helpless, how could a mere chef defy the heavens? Bufong had just returned to Fong Fong's little store and was about to open the door to enter. Even though the archers' cultivation bases were not weak, all of them were cultivators of the 3rd or 4th level. Last time, it was a 9th-grade supreme martial artist from the Azura sect, and this time, it was an incomparably terrifying supreme beast. What kind of sin had the imperial capital committed? Bufong's brows twitched. He didn't expect that this guy would actually chase him all the way to the Light Wind Imperial City. If the toad's meat is added to the Buddha jumps over the wall soup, the effect will be even better, and the detoxification effect will be even stronger. Ji Qingxue followed the general who was guarding the city and stood on top of the city wall once again. He raised his head and gazed into the distance. The arrows that were shot at the leg of the toad were all bounced off, and they didn't even manage to scratch the toad's skin. Owner Boo, the ingredients are all here. This time, the citizens of the imperial capital finally had a clear look at the gigantic spirit beast standing outside the city gate. A gigantic foot descended from the heavens and violently stomped on the city gates of the imperial capital. As the gigantic foot stomped on the city gates, it brought along a surging gale. The gale whizzed up like a hurricane, blowing the people on the city walls until they swayed from side to side. A deafening croak resounded through the air. That incomparably gigantic supreme beast didn't even give her the courage to resist. Her delicate face was slightly flushed, and fine beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. After crossing the city wall, the gigantic foot landed inside the imperial capital, outside the imperial capital city gate. Ji Qingxue's face was as cold as frost. With his hands behind his back, he stood proudly on the city wall, allowing the strong wind to blow at his hair and robe. Many buildings in the city had been turned into ruins by this stomp, collapsing and collapsing. On the walls of the imperial capital, boom, they were completely helpless against Xiao Meng's poison. The godly hall of the wildlands supreme being said coldly. Ji Qingxue felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. You are the emperor of the Light Wind Empire, right? Force the city? The Light Wind Imperial City is not worthy enough. We just want to know if Bufong is in the Imperial City. However, the one-legged toad was a supreme being beast after all. How could these arrows break through its defenses? Humph. Nonsense. These ingredients are all extremely nourishing. With General Zhao's current body, a single bite is enough to take your life. The supreme being expert from the godly hall of the wildlands was too lazy to say anything more to Ji Qingxue. Bufong immediately furrowed his brows. He turned his head and saw the terrifying spirit beast outside the city gate. It was as if a huge shadow was shrouding the entire imperial city. The archers who were already prepared immediately loosened their bowstrings. The one-legged toad landed in front of the city wall. Its gigantic eyes turned and locked onto Ji Qingxue, who was standing proudly on the city wall. Just as Ji Qingxue was ready to die, a rough voice suddenly rang out. Several figures descended from the toad's head and floated high above his head. The huge tremors and croaks slightly startled Bufong, who was in the Xiao mansion. Ji Qingxue felt an extreme headache. He felt as if his heart had been hollowed out. He supported himself on the cold bricks of the city wall and felt a little depressed. Xiao Yinyu and Xiao Xiaolong were startled for a moment. Then, they were pleasantly surprised and hurried into the house to help the dying Xiao Meng to Fong Fong's little store. Bufong unhurriedly put down the door and walked out of the store. He raised his head and raised his eyebrows when he saw the supreme toad that towered into the clouds. Even though the old physicians were so frightened by the one-legged toad that their legs turned to jelly, when they saw the ingredients that Xiao Yinyu handed to Bufong, their faces were filled with anger. The imperial physicians who were about to criticize Bufong immediately froze. The words that they were about to say were stuck in their throats. Bufang rolled his eyes. He was too lazy to talk to these stubborn old physicians. He put away the ingredients and walked out of the Shao mansion with his hands clasped behind his back. The one-legged toad's aura was extremely terrifying. With each leap, it was getting closer and closer to the imperial city. He slowly walked out of the room where Shao Meng was and came to the courtyard. He saw several old imperial physicians kneeling on the ground in the courtyard with a frightened face. "Hurry and get all the archers into position," Ji Qingxue weakly ordered. "Archers, shoot. Shoot this beast to death." These ingredients were not simple. Black spirit abalone, tiger-striped shark's fin, and so on were all high-grade ingredients with high prices. It was not easy for Xiao Yinyu to obtain them in such a short time. In other words, there was no need to look into the distance at all, because the one-legged toad was simply too huge. It was like a towering mountain peak that towered into the clouds, crushing down from afar. The intense pressure caused Ji Qingxue's breathing to quicken. It was truly gigantic. The commoners had never seen such a gigantic spirit beast before. It was like a small hill, and merely standing there, the pressure it exuded was suffocating everyone. "Since you guys are so awesome, why don't you save Xiaomeng?" Bufang simply said. Ji Qingxue handed over the ingredients to Bufang. A violent wave of air whistled through the air, sweeping up the rubble on the ground as it shot toward Bufang. An expert from the godly temple of the wildlands revealed a trace of disdain in his eyes. A mortal empire was nothing in his eyes. Bang! Xiao Yinyu came back, dragging a large pile of bags. Ji Qingxue was taken aback. Were these people here for owner Bu? However, in front of a supreme beast like the one-legged toad, they were nothing but ants. Gua! It was obvious that they had paid a great price. Did they want him a hand over the 10,000 bestial flames? Unfortunately, he had already swallowed and refined the 10,000 bestial flames. If he wanted the flames, he didn't have them. If he wanted his life, he wouldn't hand them over. Bufang walked out of the Shao mansion and headed straight for the store. Bufang curled up the corners of his mouth as he thought to himself. A gigantic leg descended from the sky, trampling the newly built alleyway in front of the store into ruins. "I'm the Emperor of the Light Wind Empire, Ji Qingxue. May I know how my Light Wind Empire offended you experts to the point of bringing such a terrifying spirit beast to the city?" Ji Qingxue asked in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. The bricks on the ground suddenly caved in and shattered. When his father was still on the throne, there weren't so many messy things. Last time, it was like this when the army invaded the city. This time, it was the same with the supreme beast. "Owner Bu, what have you done to incur the wrath of the heavens and the people?" Although his eyes were filled with fear, he still had the pride of an emperor. He didn't back down. However, Ji Qingxue was a little dumbfounded. It was the one-legged toad, the supreme beast. "Bring Xiao Meng to my store." Ji Qingxue looked at the panicking crowd below him. His pupils shrank, and a murderous aura emerged. Xiao Xiaolong's eyes were also filled with fear. They were imperial physicians, so they were naturally well-versed in medical knowledge. How could they not understand such a simple principle? The one-legged toad rolled its eyes and leaped up with its sole leg. It stomped hard on the imperial city. The toad's cry shook the heavens and resounded in everyone's ears like a thunderclap. Saving a dying person with just a meal? Why didn't such a chef ascend to the heavens? In the face of this terrifying existence, the buildings were like paper. Ji Qingxue slammed his fist on the bricks of the city wall and roared furiously. His roar was filled with a strong sense of unwillingness. Bufang glanced at the imperial physicians and curled up the corners of his mouth. The crowd that saw the one-legged toad was terrified. They knelt on the ground as if they had seen a demon. Ji Qingxue was so angry that his face turned green. However, he felt powerless. Chapter 359. Even though he was puzzled as to how a 7th-grade battle saint could subdue and devour the 10,000 bestial flames, this wasn't the main point of his concern. It was a supreme beast with intelligence. The one-legged supreme being Toad leaped into the imperial city and crossed over the city walls. They couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief that it didn't trample them into pieces. Buffon glanced at the two and couldn't help but furrow his brows. Was this guy here for Honorbu again? Impudent. The other, supreme being expert from the godly temple of the Wildlands, glared at Buffon with greed in his eyes and threatened him. Kid, hand over the 10,000 bestial flames. Or else, the entire light wind imperial city will be destroyed because of you. As he took a step forward, the ground was instantly shattered by an invisible force. Numerous cracks spread out in all directions. The flames on the fire dragon's body were still burning. Its eyes were like bronze bells, emitting a surging, killing intent. The puppet that was destroyed by the Shura sect overlord, a half-step divine expert, turned out to be unharmed. This familiar figure was indeed that puppet. The sound of metal scraping against metal resounded. Everyone in the store was dumbstruck. Buffon looked at the giant one-legged toad. Its leg was like a pillar that supported the heavens as it stood in front of the store, emitting a surging pressure. In the distance, Xiao Yinyu and the others were supporting Xiao Meng, who was on the verge of death. He was wondering where this 7th grade ant got his confidence from. As it turned out, the puppet that defeated 5 people in the 100,000 Mountains was staying in this store. Did they come to the store to cause trouble? An iron puppet stood behind Buffon. Its mechanical eyes flickered with red, purple, and gray lights. The 10,000 bestial flames was a heaven and earth obsidian flame. It was extremely important to a supreme beast. If it wanted to evolve to a higher realm, it would need the help of the 10,000 bestial flames. Its speed was so fast that they couldn't catch it. Buffon couldn't be bothered to say anything to these supreme being experts. He turned around and waved his hand, intending to walk into the store. The warrior from the godly temple of the Wildlands had never suffered such humiliation before. He bellowed angrily, and all the muscles on his body bulged. He stomped his foot on the ground, and the ground shattered with a loud bang. With a flap of his wings, his aura was like a rainbow. It is Xiao Bai. The clothes-stripping demon Xiao Bai is about to make his move. The light in Xiao Bai's eyes kept flickering. Finally, they completely locked on, turning into an ice-cold grayish white. 2 figures floated down from the toad's head and landed in front of Buffon. The godly temple of the Wildlands' supreme being brandished his fists and charged straight at Buffon. The crushed stones on the ground seemed to be pushed up by a tremendous pressure. Ouyang Xiaoi shouted excitedly. Her big eyes sparkled with excitement. Buffon furrowed his brows, and a wisp of green smoke curled around his hand. Then, the black turtle constellation Wok expanded and stood in front of him. Is this a semi-divine tool? The godly temple of the Wildlands' supreme being muttered suspiciously. Xiao Bai has transformed. With a flap of its wings, a scorching gale immediately rose, bringing along the fire dragon's body as it shot towards the majestic light wind imperial capital. The one-legged toad suddenly croaked, as though it was trying to encourage itself. Its huge eyes stared at Buffon with a ruthless glint. There seemed to be an invisible wave of air around them, gradually dissipating. Their eyes were staring at Buffon, filled with greed and desire. The important thing was, he had finally found this kid before anyone else. He could finally obtain the 10,000 bestial flames. He stared at Buffon and took a step forward. Such an existence running into the imperial city was simply a nightmare for the light wind imperial city. You guys wait inside the store. After I finish dealing with this guy, I will also add another ingredient to the elixir cuisine. A semi-divine tool in the form of a wok had never been seen before. Oh, I didn't expect a 7th grade ant like you to challenge me with just a semi-divine tool. Very well. Without a doubt, it was another spirit beast. Your Majesty. Another one came. The godly temple of the Wildlands' supreme being naturally didn't care about Xiao Yinyu and the others. He only had eyes for Buffon. If it weren't for the 10,000 bestial flames in Bu Fang's body, he wouldn't have cared about a mere 7th grade battle saint. Then, a familiar figure suddenly rushed out of the store. A pair of dazzling metal wings appeared on Xiao Bai's back. Rays of light swirled around the wings, emitting an ice-cold glint. Under the afterglow of the setting sun, the wings shone with a myriad of colors. 300 miles away from the Imperial City, they also witnessed this terrifying scene. A supreme beast that seemed to be able to suffocate them and two incomparably powerful supreme beings. Just the thought of this lineup made their hearts tremble. What was the background of this 7th grade brat? He even had such a strange semi-divine tool. Moreover, that semi-divine tool seemed to be extraordinary. His punch was actually unable to shake it. This was also the reason why he chased after Bu Fang all the way to the Light Wind Imperial City. Ouyang Xiaoyi was so excited that she almost screamed out loud. This guy was showing off. Buzz, the godly temple of the Wildlands, supreme being expert, felt as if his punch had landed on a small mountain. He felt them all over. From time to time, his hideous mouth would open and a scarlet flame would appear. His figure immediately retreated a few steps. Speaking of which, it was strange. Once they entered the store, the Supreme Being's pressure that had been suppressing them disappeared. As expected, this store was extraordinary. Immediately, the Supreme Being expert's pupil shrank, and he sucked in a breath of air. He wanted to make Bu Fang's heart tremble. He wanted to make Bu Fang involuntarily kneel under his pressure. However, just as the general stood up and looked into the distance, his heart palpitated. Xiao Yinyu and the others were stunned. Then, they nodded and quickly entered the store. Compared to humans, it was more difficult for a supreme beast to break through. It was extremely rare for a supreme beast to have such an opportunity. Therefore, its desire for the 10,000 bestial flames was even stronger than that of a human. A buzzing sound resounded. Then, Xiao Yinyu and the others felt their vision blur. It was as if a figure had dashed past them. Even though they were separated by such a long distance, the terrifying Supreme Being's pressure still made Ji Chengshue's heart palpitate. It was another Supreme Beast. The godly temple of the Wildlands expert coldly smiled. Bu Fang calmly looked at him. There was neither joy nor sorrow on his face. This was an opportunity that could only be chanced upon. Ji Qingxue was taken aback. He turned his head and saw the enormous flapping fire dragon rapidly approaching the Light Wind Imperial City. Ji Qingxue, who was lying limply on the city wall, struggled to stand up. He looked at the enormous footprint in the city and the ruins that covered the ground. His heart was bleeding, and he was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. He wanted to use his strength to suppress others. The destructive power of a Supreme Beast was even greater than that of a human 9th grade Supreme Being. A casual movement of its gigantic body could destroy a building. As they faced this puppet, they couldn't help but tense up. Moreover, it was a dragon. The godly temple of the Wildlands Supreme Being smiled in surprise. Then, he lowered his aura and crushed the crushed stones on the ground. Ji Qingxue really wanted to cry. Were they here to deal with Onurbu? Did you eat it? Do you think we are fools? The 10,000 bestial flames is a heaven and earth obsidian flame. Do you think it's cabbage? Do you think you could digest it just like that? The one-legged toad rolled its eyes. The two supreme beings from the godly temple of the Wildlands also took in a deep breath. I finally found you. Trying to run away after acting tough. You really don't respect us supreme beings, do you? The godly temple of the Wildlands Supreme Being sneered. Just like before, this kid's cultivation was only at the 7th grade battle saint level. A scarlet fire dragon spread its wings, covering the sky and the earth. A terrifying, scorching heat poured out in torrents. Xiao Yinyu and the others were shaken. Would this affect Onurbu's elixir cuisine? As they thought about this, their complexions suddenly became unsightly. In the distance of the Imperial City, in the direction of the setting sun, a huge black shadow flew over. This heaven and earth obsidian flame was not only an opportunity for human supreme beings, it was also an opportunity for supreme beasts. I already said that I ate the 10,000 bestial flames. I can't take it out. I still have things to do. You guys get lost." With a loud bang, a turbulent wave of energy spread out in all directions. "I already ate the 10,000 bestial flames," Bu Fong said seriously. With the 10,000 bestial flames, he might be able to find an opportunity to break through the shackles of the ninth grade Supreme Being realm. It was like a cannonball speeding over. Suddenly, the godly temple of the Wildlands Supreme Being felt a chill run down his spine. Chapter 360. Hooks shot out from Xiao Bai's arms, grabbing onto the leg of the one-legged toad. The moment he slashed out with the dragon bone kitchen knife, true energy filled the knife, turning into a huge golden dragon bone kitchen knife. Although the minced meat was minced because of the toad's huge body, it wasn't small. Rip, rip, swoosh, swoosh. The Supreme Being aura that had erupted was directly dispersed by the fat dog. The three attacks were extremely terrifying, and they all smashed towards Whitey. The metal wings on Xiao Bai's back flapped. With a swishing sound, a shield was formed above his head. A howling gust of wind blew in the Imperial City. A muffled sound shook everyone's heart. Xiao Yinyu and the others turned pale. Blackie wrinkled its nose and shot a glance at Bufong, who was standing there calmly. Its mouth twitched. Swoosh! The experts of the godly temple of the Wildlands roared. Their hair stood on end, and their muscles tightened. Terrifying energy burst forth. A huge axe slashed down from above. The air was directly cut apart, emitting a series of explosive sounds. With a step, it floated up. With a swishing sound, it collided with the first Supreme Being expert of the godly temple of the Wildlands. Xiao Bai's body shrank, and his entire body shot out like a cannonball. Blood gushed out like a waterfall, covering the ground. The power of this axe was extremely terrifying. Many of the flying knives on Whitey's metal wings were smashed into pieces, and its body was directly smashed into the ground, causing a cloud of dust to rise. The expert of the godly temple of the Wildlands who was holding the axe let out a carefree laugh. He raised his fist and punched at the toad's foot. Blood spurted out, and the black shadow was sent flying back at an even faster speed. The one-legged toad was injured. It was completely enraged and went berserk. Gray light swirled around Xiao Bai's body as a dense killing intent burst out. The fat dog's mouth twitched, and it raised its dainty paw. When it swung its paw, the pupils of the two experts shrank. Some were frightened, and some were excited. After all, it was a battle between Supreme Being experts. How could it be so easy to watch? The skin and flesh on its leg were minced, turning into chunks of toad meat that scattered in the sky. Blood rained down, bringing with it a majestic spirit energy that covered the entire Imperial City. The collision in the air created an explosion. Shock waves rolled out, and the crushed stones on the ground were crushed, turning into powder. The wings on its back disintegrated and turned into flying daggers. Those flying daggers gathered on its fist, causing it to become unprecedentedly huge. The might of a dragon burst out, and a dragon roar resounded. One of the Supreme Beings narrowed his eyes. He stepped on the void, causing the air to explode as he sped out, whistling towards Whitey. The two of them were slightly taken aback. They turned their heads around and saw a lazy fat dog lying at the entrance of the store. Bang! The one-legged toad, which was like a small mountain, widened its eyes. It covered its mouth with its hands and howled miserably. The fact that it could fight against 5 experts at once meant that the lump of metal in front of it was an expert at the peak of the Supreme Being realm. It was slightly surprised. It looked at Xiao Bai's metallic wings, which shone brightly under the afterglow of the setting sun, and at Xiao Bai's gray eyes. It opened its mouth and yawned. A figure dashed out from the ruins on the ground. The wings on its back flapped, and it soared into the sky. The huge one-legged toad rolled its eyes, and it opened its mouth. A black shadow suddenly shot out from its mouth, tearing through the air. The shock waves dispersed with a loud rumble, forming layers of ripples. The expressions of the two supreme beings from the godly temple of the wildlands changed drastically. They roared, and their supreme being auras filled the air. They want to help the one-legged toad. A man and a puppet. Swoosh! A resplendent golden light shone. The two of them collided in the air. This was a collision between supreme beings, and it was a collision between top-notch supreme beings. Swoosh! Green smoke twirled around, and a pitch-black dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. Xiaobai didn't flinch, and he also punched out. The cold mechanical voice reverberated in the surroundings, and it sounded like a demon crawling out of hell. It was incomparably terrifying. With its mountain-like body, if it stomped down, the entire ground of the imperial city would shatter. Xiaobai's gray eyes didn't have the slightest trace of emotion. That kid, the pupils of the godly temple of the wildlands experts shrank. They didn't expect Bufang to be able to break the one-legged toad's sneak attack, and he even injured the toad. Bufang's mind flickered, and the black turtle constellation Wok instantly flew out. It expanded continuously in the sky, and soon it became a huge wok that could suffocate people. The whistling wind blew Bufang's hair, causing it to flutter. A loud explosion resounded. The one-legged toad didn't slow down. Instead, under the effect of gravity, it became faster and faster. The black shadow that was dashing toward Bufang paused for a moment. Then, it was directly cut into pieces by the golden kitchen knife. Boom! Its body, which was dashing forward, was also pressed back into the ground. The result of the collision, which was watched by tens of thousands of people, was revealed in just a blink of an eye. Under the lead of the soldiers, the citizens had already hidden in the corners of the imperial city. They were all watching the battle in fear. A black shadow bypassed Whitey and sped toward Bufang. Its speed was so fast that an ordinary person's eyes would not be able to catch sight of this black shadow. A punch was aimed at Xiaobai. A battle of this level made them shudder with fear. That lump has actually mutated. Looks like that kid Bufang got a lot of benefits during this trip. After this mutation, that lump has a lot of room for improvement. Blackie, who was lying on the ground, was finally awakened by Xiaobai's ice-cold words. Its doggy eyes slightly squinted, looking toward Xiaobai's location. In the next instant, the howling wind descended from the sky, intending to trample Bufang into pieces. A suction force came from the wok, sucking in the minced meat that was scattered in the sky by Xiaobai. It was as if a storm was raging in the hearts of the two. Within this store, there was actually a supreme beast. The frog croaked unceasingly. Then, the one-legged toad's eyes revealed a dense, killing intent. It suddenly leaped up, rushing toward the sky. That was its tongue, the tongue that could pierce through the flesh of a supreme being. Boom! The two of them, one in front and one behind, charged toward Xiaobai. The might of a supreme being was displayed to the fullest. The air seemed to be unable to bear the pressure from the two of them, and it began to rumble. Troublemakers will be stripped as an example to others. The two supreme beings looked at each other. Then their bodies shook and true energy gushed out from their bodies, twining around their muscular bodies. With a tearing sound, streaks of blood appeared on their bodies. However, before their bodies could soar into the sky, they felt their hearts palpitate. The supreme being from the godly temple of the wildlands was sent flying by Xiaobai's punch. The bones in his arms emitted crisp, cracking sounds, and his pupils shrank to the size of sesame seeds. That scene had shaken them to their core. The remaining supreme being also made his move, and a profound, heavy axe appeared in his hand. Previously, when he threw out this semi-divine tool, it was unexpectedly deflected by that lump of metal's flying knives. This time, he definitely couldn't let the other party dodge it so easily. The one-legged toad stomped down, as if it wanted to crush the entire imperial city. The thing that Bufang chopped off wasn't anything else. It was the one-legged toad's tongue. That forked tongue was slightly purple, and it was still wriggling on the ground after being chopped off. The metal wings on his back suddenly flapped, and his nimble body shot out. The toad's leg was injured, and Xiao Bai's ice-cold eyes swept over it. His body approached the supreme being toad, and he wanted to kill it with a spurt of energy. The flying knives on Xiao Bai's fist twisted ferociously, and in an instant, the toad let out another miserable howl. Its big eyes were filled with terror. Bufang carried the golden dragon bone kitchen knife on his shoulder, and he strode toward the one-legged toad. Ouyang Xiaoyi's excited face instantly stiffened, and she felt a chill spreading from the bottom of her heart. After the transformation, Xiao Bai seemed to have become somewhat terrifying. Bang! Goa! The metal wings on Xiao Bai's back slightly curled as he strode toward the two supreme beings from the godly temple of the Wildlands. Facing Xiao Bai, the two supreme beings from the godly temple of the Wildlands didn't dare to be careless. The scene where Xiao Bai fought against 5 supreme beings alone was still fresh in their minds. After twirling his knife, Bufang naturally slashed forward. Carrying the resplendent golden dragon bone kitchen knife, Bufang indifferently glanced at the sneak-attacking toad. Then his eyes fell on the ground. The dragon's breath fiercely collided with the city wall and dispersed in all directions. Heat waves billowed and covered the sky. Suddenly, the fire dragon sensed that something was amiss. It retracted its dragon breath, and the surging flames immediately dissipated. Hot air floated up. Ji Qingxue slowly opened his tightly shut eyes. Not only him, but all the soldiers on the city wall also opened their eyes in disbelief. They were still alive. They were still alive. Ji Qingxue abruptly stood up and raised his head. He saw that above the city wall, there were countless white jade talismans floating in the air. Those jade talismans were filled with a mysterious aura. When they were linked together, they turned into a strange curtain that looked like a starry sky. It was because of that curtain that the fire dragon's dragon breath didn't burn them into ashes. Below the city wall, there were 3 figures standing. One of them was an old man with white hair and eyebrows. His hand was pinching a talisman, and his body was surging with true energy. The old man stepped into the air and hovered in front of the fire dragon. Every debt has its debtor. Why do you need to vent your anger on these mortals? No matter what, you are still a supreme beast, the supreme elder said gently. The fire dragon's eyes widened. It opened its mouth and breathed out another dragon breath. That monstrous dragon breath rolled and rolled. The supreme elder pinched the talisman again, and the numerous jade talismans floated in front of him, blocking the dragon breath. The flames dispersed, and the fire dragon stared at the supreme elder. The supreme elder smiled warmly. With a dragon roar, the fire dragon flapped its wings and soared into the sky. It flew toward the battlefield in the imperial city. It couldn't be bothered with the old man. Ai Yin and Yi Xiling also rushed up the city wall. They stood on top of the city wall and watched the battle in the distance. It was a battle between supreme beasts. They couldn't get close, and they didn't dare to get too close. The supreme elder also landed on the city wall. He didn't plan to take action. Supreme elder, hurry up and help. How can Honorbu fend off so many supreme beasts? Ai Yin looked anxiously at the supreme elder, who was beside her. It's fine, since he dared to steal the 10,000 bestial flames. He should be able to stop them. I can't do anything now. The main character hasn't arrived yet. The supreme elder smiled and waved his hand. Although Ai Yin was unwilling, she didn't know what else to say. She could only turn her head angrily and watch the battle in the distance nervously. The mountain-like one-legged toad fell to the ground. It was completely suppressed by Xiao Bai and couldn't move. The toad let out a roar, and a wave of water gushed out from its mouth. However, before it could do so, Whitey's fist smashed into its stomach. With a gulp, the toad's eyes widened, and it swallowed the water that had surged up to its throat. The one-legged toad almost choked to death. How could anyone bully a toad like this? Bufong carried the golden dragon bone kitchen knife and dashed forward. With a leap, he landed on the one-legged toad's stomach. He put down the golden dragon bone kitchen knife and pressed it against its stomach. The struggling toad felt a chill spread from its stomach to its entire body, and it couldn't help but panic. As Bufong's cultivation increased, the dragon might of the golden dragon bone kitchen knife gradually increased its suppression on spirit beasts. Although the one-legged toad was a supreme beast, it still felt a wave of pressure. Facing this pressure, it was instantly frightened. Bufong clicked his tongue in wonder. As expected of a supreme beast, the meat of its entire body was overflowing with dense spirit energy. It was truly a top-notch ingredient. After walking a few steps on the one-legged toad's stomach, Bufong finally locked his gaze on the one-legged toad's single leg. This toad's leg was extremely sturdy and powerful. It was the essence of the one-legged toad. Even though it was cut by Xiao Bai previously, it was only a small cut on the skin. Thinking about it, this single leg should be an extremely good ingredient. The one-legged toad sensed Bufong's malicious gaze, and it instantly started to struggle crazily. Its single leg wanted to shake off the attack, but it was firmly pressed down by Xiao Bai, and it couldn't move at all. Bufong once again lifted the golden dragon bone kitchen knife and hovered in the air, directly facing the one-legged toad's thigh. Ignoring the one-legged toad's aggrieved and tearful gaze, Bufong leaped up. His knife flashed, and his figure suddenly descended. He waved the golden dragon bone kitchen knife and slashed at the one-legged toad's single leg. Croak! How could the one-legged toad allow itself to be captured so easily? In the end, it fiercely struggled and let out a desperate croak. A broken black shadow shot out from its mouth, and it almost pierced through the air. This was its last attack, and it wanted to stop Bufong's final attack. However, a steel hand suddenly rose up and grabbed the tongue that had shot out. It was unable to even pull back its tongue. Swoosh. The sharp golden dragon bone kitchen knife could easily chop off such a huge spirit beast leg. Fresh blood gushed out. Bufong's mind flickered, and he put the giant toad's leg into the system's dimensional storage. The toad, which had lost its leg, had lost all hope in life. Its single leg was its essence, and it was its reliance. Now that it had lost its leg, it lost all of its essence, and its body shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. From its hill-sized body, it instantly shrunk to the size of a house. Its aura was extremely dispirited. The pair of metal wings on Xiao Bai's back spread out once more, and its gray eyes glowed with radiance. Bang! Bang! Two explosions resounded. Xiao Bai and Bufong turned their heads to look at their sides at the same time. They saw the two supreme being experts of the godly temple of the wildlands spurting blood as they were sent flying. They violently crashed into the ground, and two deep pits were created. Smoke and dust rose from the pits. Blackish slowly walked out with its enchanting cat-like steps. It licked its paws and looked at Bufong and Xiao Bai, rolling its eyes. Roar! A dragon's roar resounded in the sky. Bufong furrowed his brows. He felt a wave of heat attack him, and he saw a scarlet fire dragon hovering in the sky. The fire dragon's wings flapped, and it opened its mouth, which was full of sharp teeth. It spat out a scarlet dragon's breath toward Bufong. The dragon's breath was extremely hot, and it seemed as if it wanted to burn everything into ashes. He waved his hand, and the black turtle constellation Walk appeared in front of him. The enormous black turtle constellation Walk floated in the air. It blocked the dragon's breath. Even this supreme being dragon climbed out of the pit of fire. Bufong was somewhat surprised. The wings on Xiao Bai's back flapped, and he was about to soar into the sky. However, he was stopped by Bufong's hand. The gray Baiguang in Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flickered, and it looked at Bufong in puzzlement. It seemed as if it didn't understand why Bufong stopped it from attacking. The corners of Bufong's mouth curled up, and he turned his head to look at Blackie. Blackie, do you want to eat the delicious sweet and sour supreme dragon meat ribs? When Blackie, who was striding with its enchanting cat-like steps, heard Bufong's words, its figure suddenly stopped, and the dog meat on its body trembled. Then, its eyes, which were like the moonlight in the night sky, emitted a dazzling radiance as it looked at the fire dragon in the sky. Don't fight for it. This giant lizard belongs to the Lord Go. Woof. Chapter 362. Bufong had the most confidence in Blackie. With a flick of his mind, the black turtle constellation walked shrunk and floated in his hand. Blackie let out a snort and curled its tail around the supreme fire dragon's teeth. Then, it walked toward Bufong with its enchanting cat-like steps while dragging the fire dragon's corpse. This dog's barking was somewhat comical at this moment. The temperature of the entire imperial city rose at this moment. What was that thing? So small? As for a 10th grade divine beast. Impossible. Spirit beasts couldn't break through to 10th grade in the southern region. An incomparably powerful supreme fire dragon, a valiant supreme existence that had awed the entire southern region, was slapped to death by a dog with 2 slaps. It was really impatient. The pressure that pressed the fire dragon to the ground was probably the pressure of heaven and earth, right? Yi Xiling was dumbfounded. Was that a F***king dog? It was much more awesome than her Goldie. Blackie earnestly stared at Bufong, who had finished dissecting the one-legged toad, and instructed. The remaining sparks splashed in the supreme fire dragon's mouth. It turned its head and locked its gaze on Blackie, who was strutting cat-like steps and floating in the air. After the dragon's roar, Lord Ghost smacked his lips. No one knew how frightened he was at this moment. Bang! Just thinking about this name made one feel that it was extraordinary. The entire imperial city seemed to tremble. Then, the supreme fire dragon below stopped moving. Only then did he have time to glance at the gigantic crimson dragon's corpse. The corners of his mouth twitched. He touched the black turtle constellation walk. After being sprayed by the supreme fire dragon's dragon breath for so long, it was only a little warm. As expected of the god of cooking said, only a heaven and earth obsidian flame could activate it. Even Ji Qingxue, who was on the city wall, paled. However, Lord Ghost still had to maintain his smile. As Blackie thought about it, saliva dripped from its mouth up in the sky. The fire dragon's dragon breath emitted a scorching heat. The air seemed to distort. The gigantic dragon corpse rumbled as it was pulled against the ground. Ouyang Xiaoi was also dumbfounded. She waved her fists and awkwardly pinched her chubby cheeks. Kid, remember what you said. You must prepare the most delicious sweet and sour supreme dragon ribs for Lord Go. Xiao Yin Yu and the others, who had been staying in the store, gasped. This was a dragon, a true supreme dragon. As the dragon breath dissipated, the temperature in the imperial capital gradually dropped. A trace of fear appeared on Ouyang Xiaoi's face. However, there was more excitement on her face. That was because she saw Xiao He taking graceful cat-like steps towards the supreme dragon. The Lord Go's body suddenly swelled in the air, becoming slim and fierce. With a loud bang, the supreme fire dragon was struck down from the sky and smashed into the ground. The houses on the ground were turned into ruins. Flames flew out from the dragon's mouth. Then, it opened its mouth and spat out a dragon breath at Xiao He. Xiao Bai retreated to Bufong's side. Its mechanical eyes flickered continuously. Xiao He was enraged. Suddenly, a loud and clear bark resounded in the sky. At this moment, the supreme fire dragon had lost all signs of life. However, in the next moment, the supreme fire dragon was a supreme beast at the peak of the supreme being realm. To kill it with 2 slaps. What kind of realm was that? Ouyang Xiaoi looked at this comparison and couldn't help but feel a little weak in her heart. Could Blackie really defeat this giant dragon? On the city wall, Anayan's beautiful face was stunned. Her red lips slightly opened and she was dumbfounded. The dragon breath, which was about to drown the Lord Go, suddenly retreated after the dog's bark. In an instant, it completely submerged the fire dragon. A fat dog, ignorant and adorable. Thinking about the sweet and sour dragon ribs he had just eaten in the morning, he couldn't help but think about it. And Ai Yin, Yi Xiling, and the others were still in a state of shock. Naturally, they didn't know what the Supreme Elder was thinking. The Supreme Fire Dragon was enraged. It stretched out its paw and pressed down hard. The toad leg meat in the Black Turtle Constellation Walk was stored by Bu Fong into the system storage. Then, with a bang, the Black Turtle Constellation Walk disappeared. The Supreme Fire Dragon was struggling. Smoke and dust billowed, accompanied by angry dragon roars. All of a sudden, Xiao Bai raised his leg and stomped on the ground. Especially when his wings spread out, they almost covered the sky. The black puppy's eyes emitted a bright light. That light was as bright as the stars in the night sky. Xiao Hei smacked its lips and praised. Xiao Hei wasn't afraid of a supreme dragon. You don't know what's good for you. However, Xiao Hei seemed to be very patient. It stretched out its paw and patted again. I told you to be happy, but you really dared to use your saliva to spit at the Lord Go? Bufong, that kid really has a good eye. No wonder he's a chef. If he didn't mention it, the Lord Go, probably wouldn't have thought of using this dragon to make sweet and sour supreme dragon ribs. He was the supreme fire dragon. It was a supreme existence among supreme beasts. The one-legged toad, who was on its last breath, opened its mouth. Its eyes widened as it spat out some water. It looked at Xiao Bai with grief and indignation, then fainted. Could be a half-step divine realm. Half-divine beast? The Celestial Arcanum Sex Supreme Elder was scared the most. His eyes shrank, and his body slightly trembled. Everybody was dumbfounded. The Supreme Fire Dragon's eyes widened. This ant in front of him was actually unharmed under his dragon might. Bu Fong twirled the knife in his hand, storing the toad meat in the system storage. With a bang, the dragon bone kitchen knife disappeared. Not bad, very fat. The meat should be very good. Blackie was invincible. Ouyang Xiaoi couldn't help but think. That was just an 8th grade Earth Dragon's meat, but its taste was already so intoxicating. What if the Supreme Fire Dragon was used as the ingredient? What the hell was with this fat dog's eyes? Was this the way it looked at this dragon? The Lord Go nodded in satisfaction, looking at Xiao Bai with more admiration. This was a sensible Xiao Bai. If it listened to the Lord Go, it would have meat to eat. Today, this big lizard belongs to the Lord Go. Yulump, back off. Don't compete with the Lord Go for it. Could it be that this dog had touched the divine realm? Half-step divine realm? At this moment, everybody was dumbfounded. It turned out that everybody was wrong. This lazy dog in Fong Fong's little store wasn't the so-called supreme beast. Who was he? Where is he? Where was he? He was bewildered. The two of them formed a sharp contrast in the sky. Wait and see. Roar at me? The supreme fire dragon in the sky had been spitting out dragon breath, but it suddenly saw a black dog floating towards it from the corner of its eye. It immediately retracted its dragon breath. The gray light in Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flickered. The wings on its back shrank, and it didn't move anymore. Fine, you're the ingredient. The Lord Go will let you roar. You must maintain a happy mood. That way, the meat will be more juicy. The Supreme Elder took a deep breath. He realized that his whole body was soaked in sweat. Dragon blood, which was as hot as magma, flowed out, burning and corroding the ground. It was as if the entire world's pressure had been compressed at this moment. Bufong's gaze shifted to the toad that had fainted on the ground. Facing the sky-covering dragon breath, the Lord Go's face instantly became unsightly. Instantly, the little girl's eyes brightened. She clenched her small fists, waving them in the distance. Many people were frightened by the dragon's roar, and they knelt on the ground, shivering in fear. Some of the people kneeling on the ground couldn't help but burst out laughing. Black's eyes were filled with greed and excitement. It scanned the giant supreme fire dragon, which seemed to be able to cover the sky. A ferocious and terrifying fire dragon. Its power was too terrifying. Sizzle. A surging dragon roar suddenly surged out and reverberated throughout the entire capital city. Boom! Boom! In front of the fire dragon, Blackie was like a small black dot. Dama Huang. He had cultivated for more than half of his life, but he couldn't even compare to a dog. He was the Celestial Arcanum Sect's Supreme Elder, a peak existence in the southern region, but he was scared by a dog. Roar. Black's head was indeed not big. Although the Supreme Fire Dragon's body was much smaller than that of the one-legged toad, it was still several feet long. Blackie turned back into a fat dog, floating on the ground, landing in front of the Supreme Fire Dragon. The Lord Ghost Dog fur fluttered in the wind, caused by the dragon's roar. The fat on his body also seemed to shake. Bufang didn't care. However, the dragon's roar made his ears ring. He picked his ears and continued to wave the dragon bone kitchen knife, dealing with the poor toad. Bufang was dumbfounded. At this moment, Ji Qingxue was stupefied. He suddenly realized that everything in the world seemed to be completely different from what he knew. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.